Seder. It's time to look in the mirror, America. Do you like what you see?
I keep referring to Obama as the magic Negro.
Do you like what you see now?
Well, suck on this.
It's just a mirror, America.
Shared sacrifice by everybody.
What could it do to you except reflect your image?
I did nothing wrong at the Minneapolis airport.
The Majority Report.
Far more credible to me than PBS and Frontline.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
If I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Thursday, January 11th, 2018. And I am Michael Brooks on a Michael Thursday, and this is the five-time award-winning, two things off there.
Stuck in the past.
2018, 5 awards. Five-time award-winning Majority Report. We're broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's program, Trita Parsi, president of the Iranian American Council, on the protests in Iran, Iran's internal politics, the backlash against neoliberalism in Iran, and will our demented, unstable president destroy the mostly successful Iran deal? Internal Democratic rebellion brewing as Senate Democratic leaders seem willing to negotiate over DACA with Trump and the Republicans, potentially entertaining some very, very bad policies around immigration. And immigration agents target 7-Eleven stores across the country. This is where we're at. Joe Arpaio and Kelly Ward, the rumble of the absolutely beyond insane in Arizona. He's defending birtherism and saying that his president is wrong. All DACA recipients should be deported. Walmart is breaking out some wage increases and bonuses. They're saying it's thanks to the tax bill, but shockingly, they're being a little dishonest about it. Trump administration opening the door for states to implement working requirements for those that receive Medicaid. That'll really help already terrorized lower income people. And top U.S. government computers are linked to revenge porn sites. That's interesting. It's very nice. And Democrats invite victims of sexual misconduct to Trump's State of the Union address.
Unfair.
Trump will be up there being like, "Do I recognize you? Did I stare blankly into space while I touched your nipples on a plane?" Whatever. I don't know. Anyways, people have been totally unfair to me. And the Trump declines to say whether or not he'll sit down for an interview with Special Prosecutor Bob Mueller. And he has sold, the Trump family, Trump has sold $35 million worth of real estate, mostly to secretive buyers in 2017. As we discover the real meaning of Make America Great Again. All that and much more on today's program. Now, if you're like me, it always seemed that there were basically there were a couple of areas where Trump had good instincts. He seemed to know that the obvious moral and economic case of giving everybody free universal government health care was probably popular, which is why randomly, even in the Michael Wolff book, he apparently asked his aides why Medicare couldn't cover everybody. Obviously, he doesn't know anything, and he's a totally despicable person, so he's completely on board with all Republican efforts to destroy people's health insurance and make things even worse in an already disastrous private insurance situation. And basically, besides that, I mean, he pretty much doesn't know anything. He is an idiot in many, many ways.
I'm also lazy, so if we can just do the Medicare and I can go home.
If we could just, I think that healthcare is gross and if we could just give everybody Medicare, and I could go talk to Tom Barrack while I eat a cheeseburger, and then maybe give another go at Tillerson's wife, that would be great. But there were two areas where it seemed like he sort of, by Trump standards, which meant that he still pretty much didn't know anything, seemed to kind of know something, and those were eminent domain, awesome, because eminent domain, you can kick old people out of their homes and build a casino. And also libel laws. They really need to be toughened up, presumably on people that do honest reporting about his just sort of unending lack of ethics and connections to the mafia and, daddy issues and sexual assault and everything else. All of the stories swirling around Trump. Presumably not, as Matt pointed out earlier, he wouldn't want libel laws applied to him, presumably, toughened libel laws. But he seems to have a real fixation with it. And now with the Michael Wolff book coming out, he's back at it. Here is Donald Trump talking about the area where he probably has the most policy fluency, restricting the rights of the free press to cover him.
We are going to take a strong look at our country's libel laws so that when somebody says something that is false and defamatory about someone, that person will have meaningful recourse in our courts. If somebody says something that's totally false and knowingly false, that the person that has been abused, defamed, libeled, will have meaningful recourse. Our current libel laws are a sham and a disgrace and do not represent American values or American fairness. So we're going to take a strong look at that. We want fairness. You can't say things that are false, knowingly false, and be able to smile as money pours into your bank account. We're going to take a very, very strong look at that. And I think what the American people want to see is fairness.
So I was born in Africa and wiretapped you? Okay. Yeah, bring on the new libel laws, you orange-faced prick. That's the great thing. I mean, it's like, I just love the fact that, yes, if this was applied to him, I mean, the guy, when he's not threatening people that have accurately reported about him, he's basically arguably libeling everybody else. Like, even by UK standards, what might end up happening is that Trump's libel cases are still thrown out, even under a generous standard. And then all of a sudden, he's just getting sued for libel constantly and losing. Folks, window treatments are one of those soulless adulting terms for necessary but boring AF. I think we all know what that stands for. Your blinds don't... What? Your blinds. You don't even need to think about them unless you move or they break. When they're right, though, everything in your home looks better. And when they're wrong, everything in your home looks cheap. But let's be honest, taking the time to pick up and buy blinds sounds expensive, kind of boring, and installing them yourself sounds harder than any self-respecting adult wants to admit. But Blinds.com makes it easy for you. Not sure what you want or even where to start? With Blinds.com, you get free online design consultation. Just send them a picture of your house, and they send back custom recommendations from a professional for what will work with your color scheme, furniture, and specific rooms. They'll even send you free samples to make sure everything looks as good in person as it does online, and every order gets free shipping. This is the best part. If you accidentally mismeasure or pick the wrong color, if you screw up, Blinds.com will make the blinds, will remake blinds for free. They've really made it easy for you, and there's no excuse to leave those mangled blinds that make your place look like it's from the set of The Wire. And for a limited time, you get up to 20% off of everything at Blinds.com when you use the promo code MAJORITY. That's Blinds.com. That's Blinds.com, promo code MAJORITY, for up to 20% off of everything. Faux with blinds, cellular shades, roller shades, and more. Blinds.com, promo code MAJORITY. Rules and restrictions apply. This Sunday's illicit history for Michael Brooks Show patrons, Nathan Robinson and I, on the illicit history of Charles Murray's bell curve, were debunking the racist science and also understanding the larger political project behind it. And, check it out, obviously, on iTunes or YouTube channel if you haven't yet, or you can become one of now over, I think it's like 962 patrons at patreon.com/TMBS. Thank all of you. Hope you check it out if you haven't yet. We're going to go into our conversation with Trita Parsi on the Iran protests, the future of the Iran deal, and how Trump is destabilizing the global order on the Majority Report. Welcome back to the Majority Report. Michael Brooks, and joining me now is Trita Parsi. He is author of Losing an Enemy, Obama, Iran, and the Victory of Diplomacy, or for Diplomacy. Did I get that right, Trita?
Triumph of Diplomacy.
The Triumph of Diplomacy. Pardon me. Trita, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Trita, I've spoken to you before. I've appreciated your work for a long time, and I really appreciated an interaction you had last week on MSNBC, where you were on a panel with Bill Kristol, who most people listening to this or watching this will know is a kind of primarily known, his sort of primary contribution to American life, I guess, other than sort of scouting Sarah Palin, is agitating for wars across the Middle East. And you were on this panel, and you had an interesting response to his claiming of affinity and solidarity with people inside Iran marching for greater economic and civil rights.
Yeah, essentially, I was giving a response explaining some of the causes for these protests and some of the causes for the economic grievances, which includes the problems with sanctions relief under the nuclear deal caused by Donald Trump. And he jumps in and essentially rejects that and says that the real only cause that exists is that the Iranians want freedom, and says that we need to respect the Iranian people. Now, of course, the desire for freedom in Iran is very strong, but the idea that he would be telling me to respect the Iranian people, I was not going to let that pass without giving him an answer. And I pointed out to him that after years of arguing, bombing Iran and advocating killing Iranians, he's in no position to claim to respect the Iranian people.
Yeah, and what did you make of? I mean, I just thought it was very revealing because there was this sort of reaction on the panel from the host, almost as if you were being uncivil to Bill Kristol, and you weren't. I mean, you certainly tonally, you didn't yell, you didn't hyperventilate. You just said something that was just demonstrably true, and I'm just kind of wondering that. And we'll move to the administration in a second, which is, I guess, is at this point more to the point than Bill Kristol. But what do you make of this kind of odd paradox and problem in American discourse where we could kind of get on a Trita Parsi for just correctly noting what Bill Kristol's not only, not some errant, stupid comment that he made in 2003, but a sort of decades-long project of foreign policy agitation, that to sort of note that as somehow not civil or inappropriate, that we have to take this kind of rhetoric at face value.
Yeah, I have to tell you, one of the things I was most shocked by was how the host came to his defense.
Right.
And even said, let's get it straight, Bill Kristol has not advocated killing Iranians. And I had to correct her and say, not at all.
Right.
He has. And I don't know if it is because she's just completely ignorant and has no idea about anything. I mean, let's be frank, it's not as if all of these anchors are particularly knowledgeable about the topics that they bring in guests to talk about.
Present company accepted, of course.
Of course. But at the same time, it does seem to fit into a pattern in which the memory of the media is extremely short. And particularly now when there are good reasons to be critical of many of Trump's policies and behaviors, there seems to be a desire to be completely forgiving of anything the neocons have done simply because they oppose Trump. Now, they oppose Trump mainly because Trump rejected them, not because of any other reason. But it's still highly problematic because just because they oppose Trump doesn't mean that whitewashes what they have done with the Iraq war. That still is causing thousands of people to die in the Middle East and hundreds and hundreds of Americans who continue to suffer from that war as well. It's pretty sad because if we allow ourselves to forget, rest assured we will also allow us to repeat these mistakes.
Right, no doubt. And not only that, I mean, yes, Donald Trump rejected them rhetorically, but certainly with regards to Iran policy, he's very much embracing that neocon legacy. So let's get to that. It seems as if the protests in Iran have generally kind of been sort of dying down a bit. It's very unclear exactly what was happening with the reporting emanating out of Iran. My read was that a lot of the protests seem to be driven by actually some very familiar issues across the globe. Inequality, political cronyism, dysfunctional and parasitic relationships between kind of the business class and the governing class, which have shrunk opportunities. There's that whole Instagram feed you can see of the rich kids of Tehran, which are these, the princesses and princes of the kind of government and other wealthy elites showing off their wealth. It seems like these protests were maybe very much not there was an objection to the human rights record, certainly, but a lot of the objections were also on, day in and day out issues that you might find in many other parts of the world, dealing with the present situation we're in internationally.
Certainly, and it was actually quite interesting to see that many of these causes are economic grievances that we are finding in many different places driven by similar type of economic policies or lack of policies at times. Now, of course, in the Iranian context, you always have a situation in which there isn't a full acceptance of the current regime. So when protests of this kind happen, it is not unusual that there would also be slogans not just against economic policy, but also against the regime as a whole and its very existence and whether it should continue. In this specific case, that happened tremendously fast, and it was very, very hard-hitting. And I think it is a sign that there is a tremendous amount of discontent in the society, precisely for the reasons that you mentioned: the economic inequality, cronyism, corruption, mismanagement. But there's also the political and social frustration that have never gone away, precisely because of the repressive nature of the Islamic Republic. And one of the things that was fascinating with all of this is that the people who seem to be driving those protests, at least after the first day, seem to be people who actually were not bought into the idea that there is a possibility for change from within, who believe that there can be reform, but people who either have lost hope in that or who never believed it in the first place.
Now, do you think that, and this will cover, I guess, the reactions inside, we'll talk about the reactions inside Iran itself before we get back to Trump and the neocons and so on. So the reaction was interesting because the supreme leader basically blamed outside agitators, and maybe you could speak to that as well. I don't think there's any contradiction between absolutely recognizing that there's plenty of organic and natural grievance and opposition inside Iran, and also that, of course, the sort of intelligence apparatus of a foreign adversary might be interested in taking advantage of that. There's no real contradiction. But he basically came out and said, this is all outside agitators, blah, blah, blah. President Rouhani seemed to strike a very different note.
Yes, from the very beginning, Rouhani adopted a different tone in which he was acknowledging the protesters' right to protest, acknowledging some of their frustrations. And this was quite unusual because, I mean, some of the slogans were targeting the regime as a whole and even calling for Khamenei's death. So for him to come out and say that, they have a right to protest, it is a way for him to also criticize the conservatives. The background to all of this is that in mid-December, he gives a speech in the parliament and starts giving a hint about some of the things that's going to be in the proposed budget. And there he raises question marks about billions of dollars that are going to various conservative, controlled Islamic charities with no accountability, no transparency, and starts essentially raising question marks as to why they should be in the budget in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
This is then really angering the conservatives, and they organized the first protest in the city of Mashhad, hoping to use some of the economic frustration that existed in the country against Rouhani, because in that budget there were also cuts to welfare programs and things of that nature, and a spiking of the fuel prices that would hit the poorer segments of society quite hard. But the conservatives quickly lose control over this because people were so angry, so a lot of other people start joining the protests, and they were not there to protest Rouhani, they were there to protest the entire regime, including the conservatives. I think from Rouhani's perspective, the conservatives broke a red line that exists within the Iranian political elite, which says that they will fight their fights within the elite, within the parliament, but they will not take it out to the streets.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, the conservatives did take it out to the streets, and they quickly lost control over it and created instability in the country from the Rouhani perspective. So he's now responding in kind by siding with the protest, using the protest to hit back at his conservative critics. Because by him going out there and saying that this is not just because of economic grievances, there's also political and social grievances. What he's essentially trying to do is to ensure that he channels the anger of the protesters against the conservatives, because he is vulnerable on the economic front, but the conservatives are vulnerable on the political front. So if this is also political in nature, then he's kind of challenging their anger against them. And in some ways, this shows that not only has the discipline within the elite started to falter because they're breaking their own rules, it also shows that the protests were successful.
Yeah.
Because the protests forced the elite to have conversations that they were not willing to have otherwise, to break their own rules. And in that sense, at least in the beginning, one of their objectives have been achieved.
That's fascinating. So then, because the way I have sort of framed it is that, basically Rouhani, and of course, pardon all of the just vast differences, obviously, but Rouhani represents some type of Obama or Clinton style option within the context of the Islamic Republic, in the sense that there are all of these problems, there's all these, grievances, they're structural, and I'm very much of this establishment, but I kind of get it in certain ways, and I might be willing to make some minor adjustments, right? And I see, and obviously in a much more, risky and sort of personally dangerous situation than an Obama or Clinton face. Although who knows if Trump gets a second term. But that being said, he has had, as far as I understand, he has made some, not far-reaching, but some not insignificant reforms on certain civil liberties issues and reducing drug sentencing and things like that in Iran, which are important in people's lives. But he's also, like his more sort of center-right, centrist brethren and sistren here, he's, as you said before, in that budget still had some, real austerity proposals, which are, not going to help most Iranians. So he leveraged it against the conservatives because, of course, they're totally reactionary on human rights, openness, and civil rights, and probably not even sincere on economics at all. But does Rouhani also see here that maybe if he's going to continue to leverage that, he might need to start rethinking his economic approach a bit as well, or is it? I mean, what do you make of that?
So that's actually one of the main criticism against Rouhani from within his own ranks, within reformists, etc., who support the fact that he's trying to open up the country and he's standing up against the conservatives on some social issues. I mean, we saw just a week before this reports that the police would stop harassing women in Tehran for not wearing the hijab correctly. This week also that Iran appears likely to stop imposing death penalty on drug crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, the number of executions in Iran is going to plummet quite significantly because most of the executions are on the grounds of drug crimes. So these are things that I think many people would say are steps in the right direction. But his economic outlook is oftentimes criticized as being very neoliberal.
Mm-hmm.
And at a time where a lot of other countries are starting to realize that neoliberalism does create some wealth in the short run, but creates a tremendous amount of inequality, and perhaps most importantly, economic uncertainty and anxiety, and as a result are starting to push back against those type of policies. Rouhani has taken the country in that opposite direction. It's almost like 20, 30 years behind the rest of the world on this. Right. So when it comes to some of these austerity measures, there's going to be a need for him to rethink some of these things. There are also some things of it that actually does make sense. I mean, it is going to be very tough for many people in Iran that fuel prices go up, but fuel prices are ridiculously low in Iran because of subsidies.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a need to change that because of environmental issues and other things. But when you do that in the context of a broader neoliberal policy in which you already have created so much uncertainty and anxiety for ordinary people, then of course that ends up becoming a negative rather than something that actually can move the country in the right direction.
Right. So let's get to Trump, but first, just briefly, I know some people will be curious about this. I'm rather pretty skeptical about this myself, but I mean, these are organic uprisings, and to the extent to which there was any type of outside role or interest, it would be in the covert version of what Bill Kristol was saying on TV, which is essentially cynical actors here being interested in leveraging other people's, struggles and politics to advance their own policy ends, but not something obviously that was just sort of imposed from outside in the view of, the supreme leader and I guess a couple of people on Twitter here.
Yeah, so I think I've not seen any evidence that there will be any orchestration coming from the outside that was actually effective,
mm-hmm.
or that there were foreign intelligence services involved. Now, certainly foreign intelligence services that have expressed a desire to cause or to stir problems of this kind definitely is there. Whether they did it or not is a different problem or a different question. And the fact that the Iranian government would be very quick to go out and blame them is almost standard operations. They'll do so under all circumstances. It's difficult to take that seriously. What is more interesting is that there's Iranian officials who've gone out there and said that no, there was no foreign intervention in this or foreign backing of this. Now, there was foreign agitation about this by non-state actors. I mean, there's some elements in the U.S. and elsewhere that were really trying to agitate and try to actually encouraging the protesters to become much more violent. But there's no evidence that there were any states behind that.
Right.
So that's also an important distinction to be made, that, okay, perhaps there was some agitation coming from the outside, but these were not state-sponsored. These are individuals or groups.
So then let's turn to the response of the Trump administration. I mean, on some level, is it just sort of, even amongst the Trump people, it's hard to imagine who they're playing to when Trump, as an example, expresses solidarity with the demonstrators, even after all of the sort of damage his policies have inflicted on Iran, and specifically Iranians with regards to the Muslim ban. And, I guess I understand that obviously there is very much, U.S. Policy and desire, which we're quite overt about, for regime change one way or another. But it did seem, especially in the context of an administration that has kind of intentionally really downplayed human rights rhetoric and human rights moves in general, it seemed, I guess, just not only cynical, but also just sort of ludicrous.
I would tend to agree with that. I mean, as my colleague Reza Marashi pointed out, Trump has tweeted 2,900 times since he became president. Only 4 of those tweets mentioned human rights. Mm-hmm. All 4 of those tweets were on Iran.
Wow.
Nothing on Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
Nothing on Syria. Nothing on the genocide that currently is taking place in Myanmar. Nothing. But then suddenly on Iran, then that leaves the impression, a strong impression, that he's simply just instrumentalizing human rights, that he's trying to use that for his own objectives of just pursuing a confrontational policy. And this is very unhelpful, and we saw the effect of that at the Security Council. Nikki Haley, who's using her ambassadorship at the UN to essentially launch her presidential campaign, called for an extra session at the UN Security Council. This is quite unusual because the Security Council only deals with issues that are defined as threats to international peace and security. These protests were not at that level, but nevertheless, a meeting was held, and the meeting ended up becoming one in which most of the countries used it to criticize the United States and call into question why the meeting was being held in the first place.
Right.
And warning that this was undermining the authority of the Security Council and its credibility. Only 2 countries sided with the U.S., and that was Peru and the U.K. All countries, of course, expressed concern about the human rights situation in Iran, but quickly turned it to criticize the U.S. and then also call for the U.S. not to kill the nuclear deal. Mm-hmm. So it showed what a farce it had become precisely because the Trump administration has zero credibility on this issue. Compare this to the situation at the UN when you use the proper channels to criticize Iran's human rights abuses, to legitimately criticize it. That's at the Third Committee in the General Assembly and at the UN Human Rights Commission, in which the annual resolution on the human rights situation in Iran that is highly critical of Iran's human rights abuses passes with roughly 75 to 85 votes in favor for the last couple of years, only 30 or so countries voting against. If the vote had been held at the Security Council, the United States would have lost, whereas under normal circumstances, it wins with a margin of 50 votes. But when you do it the wrong way, with no credibility, and it's so blatantly clear that you are just instrumentalizing it for your own reasons, then you lose. And that what happens then is that it's actually the human rights situation in Iran that suffers because there is a need for putting a spotlight on the human rights abuses in Iran. And there's a need to do it the right way so it doesn't backfire. And the Trump administration is doing essentially everything the wrong way.
So then let's move then to the deal. And also just, I mean, another sort of just clear point to bring up, obviously, is that, even if you took theoretically for a moment the idea that anybody from Trump to Bill Kristol to Nikki Haley was sincere about Iranian human rights, which I certainly don't, obviously an American leader, but most especially a Donald Trump, keeping quiet would obviously be the most helpful so as to not be utilized by the regime. The deal with Iran, obviously Trump personally, and there does seem to be conflict inside the administration about it, he has tried to undermine it, and it does seem to be really purely just an expression of his just kind of personal emotions and frustration and humiliation that he can't put his own distinct spin on it. I guess before we get there, could you just briefly re-review, in fact, in the face of all of this propaganda, and not just from Trump, but really all of the Republican neocon and pretty much all the Republican foreign policy establishment, the deal is working quite effectively, right?
Well, the 2 immediate objectives of the deal are working perfectly fine. The one is that, of course, blocking all of Iran's paths to a nuclear weapon. And secondly, making sure that this wouldn't lead to a military confrontation between the United States and Iran. In that sense, it's been working extremely well. The areas where it hasn't worked is that the United States has not properly lifted sanctions. And the Trump administration has deliberately sabotaged that process. There were some problems during the Obama years as well. Not a lot of signs that was deliberate. But under the Trump administration, it's very deliberate, and there's actually clear violations by the United States now of the deal as well. So, and that's quite a sad situation because the main objectives were reached. The Iranians are not going to be able to have a pathway to a bomb, and war was taken off the table essentially, or made unnecessary. And both of those very bad scenarios will come back onto the table if Donald Trump succeeds in killing the deal.
So, and I guess the question would be then, will he? We just see reports now that he did, he didn't renew the deal. He did, and to be clear, this sort of side process of re-reviewing it every couple of months, the Congress stuck into it. This has nothing to do with the actual deal that was established in Switzerland between Iran and the P5+1. It was basically a side deal that seems to me Republicans put in as an opportunity to sort of, suggest that Obama is easy on Iran every couple of months by forcing him to reauthorize it, and then presumably Hillary Clinton, had she been elected president, and continued the Iran deal. So, Trump didn't renew it last time. There's rumors and reports, though, that, again, the recommendation that he is going to get, just as the first recommendation in his first couple of months in office from his foreign policy team, is that he should, in fact, continue the deal. So we're in this, kind of odd stalemate, and there must be internal politics inside the administration about this, with some people who very clearly want to take a very hawkish and dangerous line, and others, I guess presumably in the State Department, who, they can at least recognize a working deal when they see one.
Yeah, so there's two things here. This process of constantly, every 3 months, having to certify it to Congress, you're absolutely right, has nothing to do with the deal. It's actually an internal American mechanism. But it wasn't just the Republicans. It was actually the Democrats as well.
Right, fair.
Who pushed for that. And the root for that was because the idea that, Congress has to have a role in this. We have to be able to have oversight. And as a result, they essentially forced the executive branch to send this report to them. There's much that indicates that if that mechanism had not been put into place, Trump could have been open to just forgetting about this deal and letting it be.
Right.
But the fact that every 3 months he has to certify that something Obama did is still working, it's like a recurring insult to his ego.
Right.
And it's something that frustrates him beyond imagination.
Right.
So that's one aspect of it. The other thing is, will he then renew the waivers? Because the United States is obligated to renew the waivers that waives sanctions on Iran, essentially, as long as Iran is living up to the end of the to its end of the bargain in the deal. And there's now 9 IAEA reports that said that yes, the Iranians are actually fully complying with the deal. So the U.S. is then obligated to renew the waivers. He has to decide this by Friday. If he doesn't, then the U.S. is in clear and direct violation of the deal. And it is difficult to imagine that the Iranians would remain compliant to the deal if the U.S. is outside of it. So we will have a crisis then, but not a crisis caused by Iran, but a crisis caused by Donald Trump.
Right.
How that eventually will work out is not entirely clear. But I personally believe that there's a high likelihood that he actually will renew it. And the reason why he will renew it is actually because of their read of what these protests were caused by. You see, part of the reason why the protests happen is, of course, because the economic grievances. Some of those economic grievances are directly linked to the problems caused by Donald Trump when it comes to sanctions relief. Because the uncertainty that Trump deliberately has created about the durability of the deal by constantly going out there and speculating that he will kill the deal, or this drama that we have every 3 months to see will he or will he not renew it. That is deliberate, and it's deliberately aimed at creating uncertainty. Uncertainty then has the very direct effect of deterring companies and investors to go into the Iranian market. Banks in particular are unwilling to finance investments if their investments are going to end up becoming sanctioned by Donald Trump once or if he chooses to kill the nuclear deal. So the uncertainty then becomes a de facto sanction that is preventing the Iranians from getting the economic benefits that they were promised during under the deal. And without investments, and this is an important part that is relating it to the protest, without investments, the Iranian economy cannot create enough jobs to push down unemployment. Mm-hmm. And investments have come into Iran to a very small extent, precisely because of this uncertainty. I think there is a likelihood that the White House now has viewed the protest as a sign of its success in deterring investments into Iran. Essentially, its success in killing the deal without explicitly killing the deal, without directly making itself responsible for the death of the deal. It is still managing to kill the deal. And as a result, there's a likelihood that Trump will be convinced that let's just continue this path. We still manage to create massive problems for Iran, but we're not becoming responsible for actually having pulled the plug on the deal. That way we don't have to pay the cost of breaking away from the deal while we're still getting the benefit of seeing the Iranians suffer from not getting what they were promised under the deal.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. It's very hard for me to imagine that statement being formulated in the Trump voice, but I think that the substance makes total sense. But he'd express it very differently. But last question then. I mean, it seems then that we're in a scenario where, barring the potential of a true catastrophic nightmare of actual military an attack on Iran, does this just start to look like that, basically Europe just benefits from this more so than, that the deal goes forward, everybody else sort of continues to participate in it, and the United States is just an outlier?
I don't think the economic benefits to Europe have been as significant as some reporting has said. Yes, European companies have gone in and traded with Iran, but the investment have not occurred. So yes, they're capturing much of the trade, but the real economic benefits does not lie in the trade, it lies in the investments. And there are very few have dared to go in because of this fear of Trump killing the deal. But it's also doing other things that are, neither beneficial to Europe or anyone else. I mean, Europe is very, very much concerned right now because what Trump is doing with this deal is starting to look like a pattern in which he is just going after international agreements one after the other. Mm-hmm. It's not just the Iran deal. It's NATO. It's the Paris Agreement. It's UNESCO. It's all of these different things, which have then left Europeans with the view that the United States is no longer a pillar of the international order. It is a fifth column seeking its demise. Mm. And as a result, Europe needs to distance itself from the United States. It needs to chart its own path. It needs to create its own alliances and even move closer to Russia in some extent because the United States is now a great danger. I would direct you to the speech of the German foreign minister on December 5th. Which he said two things that were quite, I think, worrisome from an American perspective. One, in which he essentially saying that this is not an anomaly. Trump is not an exception. Trump is part of the American normal. Mm. And as a result, this will continue after Trump. He's expressing an orientation and a viewpoint that exists in the United States. He's not an exception here. And as a result...
So they read it better than Democrats do, yeah. Mm-hmm.
The second conclusion then is that U.S.-EU relations will never return to what they were pre-Trump. And that is a major geopolitical change on the global scale. That is not beneficial to the U.S. and is not beneficial to Europe. This is much bigger than just a nuclear deal.
Well, Trita Parsi, author of Losing an Enemy, Obama, Iran, and the Triumph of Diplomacy, and president of the National Iranian American Council. Really appreciate your time, Trita.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Okay, everybody. We recorded that at about 10 or so this morning. So, fresh off the presses. We're going to go into the fun half. Become a member of the Majority Report today. Majority.fm / become a member / member. Use our jet.com link as the Amazon link is dead. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't. You can follow all of us on Twitter. It's in the show notes. If you use Twitter, there's a Facebook page to like. JustCoffee.coop. Get win-win-win coffee. Workers, environment, the cooperative economy, and support the Majority Report. 646-257-3920. 646-257-3920. The IAMs will be on in a moment. We will see you in the fun half. Or on the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy, back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy, back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dannerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
Psych. Fuck them.
Almost says what? Almost says what?
Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
It's just still so good. You know what I like? I like the part I always notice something new each time we play that track, and I really noticed the Sam when he goes, "Yeah, there are a couple of them." I like that. Yeah, a couple of them. Just put them in rotation. Yeah. Are the phones up? You are calling from a 405 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, I'm Gregory from Oklahoma.
Hey, Gregory, what's going on, man?
Not much. I wanted to tell you guys about my history professor this semester. He sounds a lot like Dennis Miller.
Oh,
I thought it
sorry.
was really funny.
Oh, okay. Is it funny? You laugh at him in class? Does he? What subject?
No.
What subject does he teach? What part of history?
Modern Europe.
Modern Europe. So
history.
the Vichy regime was like bap bap bap, like Scotty on the holodeck. Only there's no Vaseline for this one, babe. Bap bap. Does he sound like that?
Somewhat, but he doesn't say. He doesn't do the but. But yeah.
What are his
He's
politics
from
like?
Connecticut. I don't know. I haven't really talked to him too intently yet. He used to be in the Air Force, I think. So yeah. But yeah. So I thought that was interesting. I started classes this week.
Congratulations.
So,
Anything else on your mind besides a nice general check-in?
Yes. Yeah. A couple days ago, someone called in and talked about the Sonny Bono lyric in the Eminem song. The person who called in and talked about it got it right. It was on the song "Role Model" from the Slim Shady LP.
Okay.
And then a person IM'd at the end of the show saying that it was on Who Knew off of the Marshall Mathers LP, which was so stupid. Like, I hope that person wasn't an Eminem fan, because as an Eminem fan who was actually, like, too young to even remember that, I know that it was from Role Model, not from Who Knew.
What I appreciate about you just actually, which is a very, very aggressive move. All right, I guess proof is in the pudding. Let's hear it. Just the instrument. Yeah, you probably shouldn't play lyrics on this show.
Probably not.
Eminem was not always the guy in his 40s who didn't like Trump. There was a pretty non-woke
that's
period.
very true. He had a lyric about Hillary Clinton on that song too.
Yeah,
how she slapped him and called him a pervert.
All right. Well, I appreciate the call. I think we stand corrected.
Stand corrected.
Thank you so much for the call, man. Take care, Gregory. Good luck in school this semester. Yeah, sure. Real quick.
There was a tweet. I think it was last night or a couple of days ago that Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit, he tweeted at Donald Trump telling him that he wasn't being a good leader and that's not the way to go. I just wanted to let people know that Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit is against Trump and he's a part of the resistance now.
All right. Well, this is sort of like a late 90s pop update in the Trump age with Gregory. I like that. Thanks, man.
Like some VH1.
Yeah, that was very VH1 of everybody right there. Yeah, go ahead.
We're going to put this to rest here. There are references to Sonny Bono in both Who Knew and Role Model. So you're both right.
I was starting to suspect
that
maybe
Eminem had a joke.
Yeah, Eminem bizarre. Might have gone to the well a little bit on the... I never really... He was actually like... Yeah, I never really liked him. I never
the first two albums.
Was super... His flow and his voice always irritated me.
Hi.
I liked his videos.
And some of his videos were interesting, but he was just like, I get it. You're an amped up poor white guy from Michigan. It's cool. Like, I respected that his brand and his identity when he was dominant was very, like, I think he was very true to himself, but I just didn't find that self to be interesting. You know, like, why listen to Eminem in a world where there's like Nas or Dipset,
Coastal Elite,
total coastal elite? Rap has its own coastal elitism. Like, rap totally tracks everything else, and New York, I mean, obviously has, it's significantly fell off from where it was. There's still great New York rappers, but you can't say in modern hip-hop that New York in any way dominates like it used to. And Chicago had a big wave, and the South. And in my mind, the best guy out there today is Kendrick Lamar, and he's from L.A. But I think in the same, there's tons of New York arrogance, like in every other endeavor. And there was really a time where it was basically like it was L.A. and New York, and everything else was just like, yeah.
I'm going to go out and say that I'm an Atlanta guy. I like the Southern hip-hop.
You like the Southern hip-hop?
I like the Third Coast, too, down in Houston. I'm all about that stuff.
I like some of it. I like some of that stuff, but I like New York best. You're calling from a 509 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Mikey, it's Steve.
Steve. What's up, Steve?
Steve Bannon.
Steve, dude. I thought we were supposed to get drinks later.
I'm in kind of a tight spot. Listen up. Okay, you've been talking a lot of shit, and I get it. I haven't been particularly great as a person.
Right.
But
I'm glad you know that.
I'm in kind of a tight spot. Listen,
tight spot. I think he would say that.
I'm scheduled to have my armpit, neck, and face boils lacerated and drained. The problem is the sons of bitches at Breitbart done cut my insurance, and I'm gonna need I need at least $750. And if you can pass me I'll take the change in your couch right now. I'm gonna be honest.
Steve, hold on. In the background, I hear water from a jacuzzi. What the hell is that about? You're pleading poverty, and you got a jacuzzi going?
I'm boiling some water to soak my feet in later. It's for the boils on my feet.
So Steve, I have a question for you. You've acknowledged
I was
that.
hoping to get Sam because I know his people control the banks, and it probably ain't no big deal for him to get $1,000 or so to send old Steve.
Yeah, no, Sam could definitely get you $1,000, no problem. But Steve, you acknowledge that you've been basically just a disgusting person. When you think about it, I'm assuming you're probably, well, I don't even know. You could be referring to everything from from racism to, promoting Republican candidates.
No. I'm talking about that. I'm talking about that shit I said about Donald.
Oh, okay. I see.
I feel terrible about that shit.
Yeah, terrible.
I feel terrible.
Do you? Oh,
I've been a bad boy.
Do you feel weird? Do you feel weird about asking? Essentially, you want like a GoFundMe for your healthcare procedures when you've did everything you could to take away health insurance for like tens of millions of people, or nah?
You're breaking up a little bit. I got a P.O. box. I sent it to the email there at the Majority Reporters. If you could spread the word, that'd be great. But you're breaking up real bad.
All right, thanks, Steve. Thank you, Steve Bannon. I think Steve Bannon as a new contributor on the show should be an ongoing. So as you can hear there, Steve's in tough shape, and it's amazing, like the rats from a sinking ship. Perrine and I actually, we talked about this, and I talked about it in the opening commentary on my show on Tuesday. Bannon is in a lineage of Pat Buchanan. And the distinction with Pat Buchanan, Bannon is somewhere in between Andrew Breitbart and Pat Buchanan. And Pat Buchanan is an intellectual architect and carried the torch for far-right, xenophobic, reactionary politics of a distinct variety that Bannon picked up, but without, and please be clear that obviously Pat Buchanan is contemptible politically, but he is a different order than a Steve Bannon. I mean, Pat Buchanan is a very well-read, very kind of erudite political operator. Bannon brands himself that way, and he's got some savvy, but this is not a brilliant guy. And he is a fusion of Buchanan and a complete just tabloid corporate bagman hack, which was all Andrew Breitbart was. And so Bannonism as a personal project, I have no doubt is going to fizzle away because he doesn't have like a real infrastructure. But the politics that he put in place and the politics that got Trump to the presidency does have a lasting point, because the only people that aren't ultra wealthy that will vote for right-wing politics are going to do it on white identity issues. So here's a classic example of this. Kelly Ward, who is now one of two absolutely deranged and demented candidates for the Republican Senate primary in Arizona, along with Joe Arpaio. I think Kelly Ward has probably harmed significantly fewer people personally than Joe Arpaio, but of course she'll go into the Senate and do everything she can to harm America and the world.
She's younger. She's got a lot more
She's
upside.
got a lot more upside. I see a lot of youth and a lot of crazy. I like what I see. So here is Kelly Ward, who is, of course, a Bannon project. She's open to chemtrails. I mean, whatever. She's exactly what you'd expect of today's Republican Party. And here she is, a singular rat on a sinking ship, scurrying away from Steve Bannon. And if you're watching this, you'll see a very funny B-roll. If you're listening, I'll explain it. There's B-roll will essentially, I'm not spoiling anything, that in this clip, she's going to essentially say that she barely knows Steve Bannon. And, of course, there's B-roll of them happily campaigning together. Here she is on CNN with Allison Camerata.
Trump. Last question. Do you expect an endorsement from President Trump?
I've gotten so many amazing endorsements. I'm so proud to have Senator Rand Paul on my team. I've also had endorsements from people like Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham and Mark Levin, conservative stalwarts. And, Steve Bannon, I don't know that I actually really got a full endorsement from Steve.
Oh, I think you were his candidate.
No, actually, I think that my message resonated with the things that Donald Trump said on the campaign trail. The America First agenda that actually began way back in 2010.
I hear you.
With the Tea Party movement.
But Dr. Ward, I'm only looking at your press release. Hold on one second. I'm only looking at your press release where you say Ward has received national endorsements from Rand Paul, Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Dick Morris, and Steve Bannon. So that's where I'm getting my information.
Yes. Yes, he but he was never part of my campaign. He was never an advisor. He's not somebody that I reach out and talk to in any way, shape, or form. So it's funny that you and especially the establishment would love to tie me to Steve Bannon. But
your press release ties you to Steve Bannon. But why are you distancing yourself now from Steve Bannon?
I am distancing myself from Steve Bannon. He's made some significant mistakes, significant gaffes that are unacceptable to me. I support the president. I support the president's family, and I support the will of the American people and the people of Arizona who want the America First policies to be put in place.
Kelly, bitch. That's Bannon's response. But I think it's a great example, though. In this administration particularly, the drama and the gossip is relevant because it's a drama and gossip administration. So that's why a guy like Mike Wolfe is the best person to understand it. But, the structural point here is that, sure, Steve Bannon bit off way more than he could chew. He's gone for now. Maybe the best case scenario with him is that instead of trying to wage a comeback, he tries to wage a vendetta and a campaign of revenge, which would be great. But all of the toxicity, conspiracy theories, bigotry, magical thinking, xenophobia, and nonsense that he built out with the funding of the Mercers, that is the Republican Party. So if we wanted to do him the sort of false honor of calling it Bannonism, we could just easily call it Republicanism. It ain't going anywhere, even if he's, giving himself more jacuzzi time.
Yeah, Breitbart still exists.
Exactly.
It's funny, the gaffes, I think we're sort of over gaffes as like a word and a thing, right? I think Trump, the 2016 really killed that.
Total gaffes.
Nobody talks
Steve
about
Bannon's
gaffes
a gaff machine. Hey, look at the retard kid in my campaign rally. What? That's what I meant to say. I never said that.
Unfair.
That's why I call it the fake news. Joe Arpaio. Everybody should look at this guy's record. I mean, people have a he's known just nationally for his virulent, cruel, and criminally investigated and prosecuted and to some respect convicted tenor as a sheriff in Arizona. But he, the amount of physical harm and cruelty that this guy's policies led. I mean, he had a campaign of terror against people of Hispanic descent, which is, of course, what all this policy is. But if you dig into it, I mean, you are talking about a singularly authoritarian, cruel, deranged, and obviously immensely racist and bigoted person. He's, of course, and naturally, another leading Senate contender for the Republicans in Arizona. And here he is talking with Chris Cuomo, who, and of course, Arpaio is also a big promoter of birtherism about President Obama. And here is your other choice. I'm sure if you're a Republican in Arizona now, this is like choosing between like Bernie Sanders and Keith Ellison. You're like, man, I've got some, if you're a progressive, you're like, damn, those are actually two good choices. They're like, I mean, she's into investigating chemtrails. She's young. She totally supports the president. She's completely insane, and she's endorsed by a whole bunch of absolutely disgusting people.
Not a felon.
Yeah, but on the other hand, Joe Arpaio personally forced convicts at his human rights abusing prisons to wear women's underwear, and he implemented, I mean, this guy for decades before
25 years.
For 25 years was terrorizing Hispanic families and agitating to ruin people's lives who'd immigrated here, and really was a trendsetter in the modern revival of overt white supremacy and terrorism in the Republican Party. Plus, he's a birther. God, I wish I could vote for both of them. Hopefully McCain will die soon. I'll have both of them in the Senate. That's what you're thinking if you're an Arizona Republican. And here's Joe Arpaio. Shots fired from Kelly Ward. She unfortunately has got that Bannon stench on her. And here's Arpaio doubling down with Chris Cuomo on being an absolute bigot scumbag.
Let's look at it a different way. You're kind of reintroducing yourself to the voters there.
Nope.
Is there any regret that you hold in your heart for the conditions that people were kept in, the nature of immigration enforcement, the birtherism claims about President Obama, things that are black marks on your record? Do you have any regret? Do you have any change on any of those?
Well, Frank Sinatra says in my way, regrets. I've had a few, too few to mention, and I'll repeat that to you. But no, I have no regrets.
That's a good goddamn guinea wop, unlike you friggin' blow-dried fool.
Wait, there's a Joe Arpaio singing thing that we might have to get to after this.
I think we're going to need to. It looks like Frank Sinatra said, we don't want goddamn spicks in the country. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. Anyways, go ahead.
Did the right thing. My people did the right thing. We were very successful throughout my 24-year tenure, the longest-serving sheriff in the history of Maricopa County. No, I don't have regrets. A few mistakes, yes. Everybody makes mistakes.
Was the birtherism a mistake?
When you have it. Oh, now you're bringing that up.
Well, why wouldn't I?
I'm going to tell you something.
Do you think it doesn't matter? You want to be a U.S. senator and you were part of a campaign to delegitimize the president of the United States? Matters, no?
No. I started this because of fake document, a government document. I didn't care where the president came from. I didn't care at all. And we have the evidence. Nobody will talk about it. Nobody will look at it. And any time you want to come down, or anybody will be glad to show you the evidence. And by the way, you're going to hear more about this fake,
so you believe that President
certificate.
Obama's birth certificate is a phony?
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. We have the evidence. I'm not going to go into all the details.
Even Donald Trump now says
that
he believes that the president was born in this country, right?
He never said about a fake birth certificate. That's the only thing I was trying to prove.
So, you know what I know? You know what I love about these people? So, of course, like, President Obama provided the certificate. There was obviously also the birth notice. And, I mean, it's like boring to even have to say again that obviously the only reason that there would be any question about Obama's birth is pure racialization. It's not even a question. And speaking, though, of things, though, that Joe Arpaio disagrees with Trump on, and this is a good 1-2 punch here, he disagrees with Trump, and Trump kind of like through gritted teeth sort of pretended to renounce birtherism when he was running for president. And now, as you could see in that meeting with Dianne Feinstein, Trump, through a process of having a sense that terrorizing children and young people who did absolutely nothing wrong and deporting them is sort of like a bad look from a PR perspective, and obviously also through having absolutely no idea what he's talking about, has been pretty open to at least some sort of deal, including potentially an awful deal, which nonetheless would protect DACA recipients. Now, of course, his base agrees with Joe Arpaio, who told NPR, deport them. When you come across these kids, or some of them are just older than kids, then deport them. You can deport them back to the country where they came from. Arpaio, of course, makes zero distinction and difference. So even if you came here as a child, grew up here, raised here, did all the right things, blah, 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 you should still be kicked out in an act of, again, just nothing else obviously could describe this besides pure rank bigotry. And nothing else could describe the hurt and freak out of the Republican base, the type of base that will vote for a Joe Arpaio to go into the Senate and attack Donald Trump from the further fascist right. This is Laura Ingraham on Fox News talking about Trump's, again, verbiage in the right direction on DACA. There's nothing substantive here. And of course, he never going to go on a line for any of these policies and has no idea what they are one way or another. But his base, his authoritarian mind meld base,
getting a bit nervous.
They have finally found something they're upset about. He could screw them. And this I have to say, I have no doubt there's a couple million people that are persuadable potentially. They went from Obama to Trump. We keep having that debate. There is an economics case that is relevant. But if you needed proof, ever more proof, that an overwhelming majority of Trump's base are just Republican voters, they're the Republican base in general, period. They have stuck with him through lying about opiate addiction, lying about taking on corporate interests, lying about how he'd fix healthcare, lying about a tax plan which benefits only the ultra wealthy and hurts people who work, lying and lying and lying and lying. And now, for this part of the base, the Laura Ingraham Fox News Breitbart base, they're finally getting upset. And what are they getting upset about? Of course, a hint of pretend humanity about DACA recipients.
And here's the part that made Jeb Bush all warm and fuzzy.
This should be a bipartisan bill. This should be a bill of love. Truly, it should be a bill of love, and we can do that.
Wait, does that sound a little bit familiar?
Yes, they broke the law, but it's not a felony. It's kind of it's an act of love.
Now, do you remember when candidate Trump ridiculed low-energy Jeb for that?
If you remember, he said they come as an act of love, okay? Tell that to the families, and there are many, many, many families who lost a loved one. Act of love, okay? There's no act of love.
And remember candidate Trump saying this?
No citizenship.
No citizenship. Yeah. No citizenship.
Everyone agree with that?
I mean, go a step further. They'll pay back taxes. They have to pay taxes. There's no amnesty as such. There's no amnesty.
Listen to the crowd.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Disgusting.
Well, maybe the president realizes that he's never going to get a wall unless he does that DACA amnesty. Maybe. And maybe he thinks he just can't end chain migration unless he gives legal status to those 800,000 illegals. They range from about 16 years of age to about 30 years of age. They're not all kids now. But that is a hard pill for many of his most loyal supporters to swallow. Today, many of my radio listeners were in meltdown mode.
We're not going to get a new wall. I'll bet my shirt we don't get it. We don't get
Sean,
verify. I'll bet my shirt on that.
If he breaks his promise and he grants amnesty to these dreamers, it's over. I think it's over.
My kids were born and raised in America. We have dreams too. You know, if we don't obey the law, nobody comes and gives us free stuff.
We are not far
right when we simply insist on abiding by the legal immigration rules and national sovereignty? When did that ever become far right?
I'm feeling deflated right now.
Well, I did my best to buck up the listeners, but it wasn't easy.
Well, I mean, in fairness, Laura Ingraham has like the personality of like a nurse in some like Nazi miniseries from like the 1960s. I don't think she's actually like a buck up person. But look, I think that really, though, I think strategically moving forward for the left, as I've always said, there's zero contradiction between recognizing that any left coalition of the future is multi-identity, multicultural, multi-expression, and that both for moral and strategic reasons, we will fight and combat any form of discrimination and bigotry that exists, period. And at the same time, any broad-based movement, of course, includes, white people, people from different, people from the Rust Belt, and so on. It needs to be a broad-based mass appeal movement. And you never cater to people's bigotry and xenophobia. And where they can be persuaded, if they can be, oh, wow, it's almost like my Laura Ingraham Nazi joke had some foundation in reality. There is Laura Ingraham sneaking in a little Hail Siege at the RNC 2016.
I vote intentional.
Oh, it certainly looks intentional to me. Yeah, Laura Ingraham. She makes Ann Coulter look funny and charming. But so at any rate, look, no doubt there are some people that I think absolutely can be persuaded with a serious program of universal health care, free college, robust attacks on corporate power. And there's absolutely other people that are solid they're in it. They're committed to that bigotry. And those are those people, and witness what they get upset by, not all of the other portrayals and lies of the Trump hustle so far. Tiny Rocket. Do you guys know this? Please retell the story of Arpaio and the dog in the burning house.
I think that's the one with Steven Seagal. They were doing correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I have no idea.
But they were shooting a show for Steven Seagal that was like Steven Seagal as like a ranger sort of person. And they would bust these, they're like getting bail bonds or some shit. I don't know.
Right.
And he went out with Sheriff Joe, and they brought in like tactical stuff and just like blew down this guy's gate and into his house and ran over his dog when they did it.
Just fucking disgusting.
It's a confluence of a lot of things.
Disgusting people.
Culture.
And now like Steven Seagal needs to be. These people are just like some of the lowest forms imaginable. They're just disgusting. G-Man 80. Why do conservatives need to feel aggrieved? They're in control of government and they play the victim. Well, that's it. That's it. I mean, I think both part of it is what Sam articulates, which is that when they control everything, they need to focus on silly marginal nonsense like, free speech or war on Christmas or whatever to drum up their base and sense of aggrievement. I think both to partially probably distract from the fact that their actual policy agenda obviously has nothing in it for anything other than the ultra wealthy, but also that you just need to keep, revving people up on bullshit, basically. And that is the through line. There's different markets. I mean, Alex Jones is conspiracy, secret government bullshit. Dave Rubin is, I'm just asking questions. Black people are inferior bullshit. Or people can't take a joke. You said Muslims are cockroaches bullshit. Or, here's some story of campus stupidity somewhere, and that's like a major national security threat bullshit. Or,
Dave Rubin's a safe space for people not used to realize or being told they're wrong.
Right, exactly. Dave Rubin is a safe space for mediocrity to feel victimized.
I got to check this guy out, it sounds like.
No, I was just, I was actually talking with Adam Proctor about this from Dead Pundits, which is a very smart podcast. And we both actually have a lot of critiques of campus left, of call-out culture, of the different ways that quote-unquote identity politics have been distorted in very, very stupid ways that are very, very harmful to real left success and achievement. And there's also very, serious critiques by people like Adolph Reed. Those conversations are actually relevant for the left to have because they impact our branding, our strategy. But anytime you find like yourself in the anti-SJW cottage industry of the internet, Peterson, Rubin, all too often Rogan, it's just easy bullshit content to reinforce self-satisfaction and is always a Trojan horse for reactionary politics. Whether of the, neoliberalish but anti-Muslim Sam Harris variety or, outright, soft alt-right to overt alt-right stuff. So, that's the game. Leftist European. The Iranian government has poured millions of dollars into founding of the Imam Ali Mosque in Copenhagen. It's a beautiful building, but the money could have created jobs for the poor in Iran. # white devil, # free marketplace of mosques. Dr. Gorka. Let's see. It just occurred to me that whilst browning some onions in lashings of Crisco, that, guess what, Cox? The alpha males are still back. Sloppy Steve is under the bus. You say, no. Fake news. Steve B is the bus, you schmucks. And I'm Dennis Hopper, all set to go off on your leftist twaddle. Oh, and little Michael Brooks, you're not Keanu in the analogy, you're Sandra, and Sam is Jeff Daniels. Ask if I'm a Nazi. I double dare you, cocksuckers. Vici Rand for life, bitches. Dr. G signing off. P.S. Get well soon, Sam. Do you remember when Donald Trump first got into office?
I don't.
No, not particularly.
You mean when he brought the jobs back?
And he brought the job. Well, he supposedly brought a particular set of jobs back to Carrier, and it was a scam because essentially he negotiated tax incentives to keep a handful of jobs in place. And as if I recall correctly, the money was already available, or it had been offered by the Obama administration and rejected by Pence, or up negotiated. I should have actually double checked what the specifics were before this. I do apologize, but maybe we can look that up. But the point was that the story was presented as something that he had uniquely done, and he basically tapped into some form of pre-existing deal to save a handful of jobs in Indiana. Now, Carrier announced earlier this week that 250 workers would be laid off of its Indianapolis plant. This was the one that Trump supposedly saved. Plant on Thursday. The announcement came a year after Trump claimed that he had saved over 2,000 jobs by threatening to tax the hell out of the company if it moved to Mexico. And then, of course, in the end, and this was the point, Governor Mike Pence promised Carrier $7 million in tax incentives to stay in the U.S. So basically, Trump came out, promised a targeted policy on a company, which he, of course, had no idea or explained how he would even remotely begin to do. And, of course, wasn't structural. Nothing like we're going to financially punish companies that move jobs or hold vast majority of money overseas, as an example, like Apple. And then Pence just came out with a tax incentive, which he could have done earlier. And then the story was reported in a fake way, fake news. And now in this news report, from the local Fox 59 affiliate. We have Chuck Jones, a former union president, and other workers. Basically, these are the people, some of them at least, these might be in the category of people who are so desperate because of how horrific our economy is under all presidents in the modern era towards labor and working people, that maybe they rolled the dice with Trump and now they see it was all a fraud.
Helping America's manufacturing workers, as we all remember, was a big part of President Trump's 2016 campaign. Nearly 2 years ago, he stood inside the Carrier factory here in Indianapolis and promised to save jobs. Tonight, the workers who say he's forgotten them sent a strong message for thousands of Americans to see.
I'm sorry that people bought into his message and sold us a bag of and now we're stuck with it for a while.
The former union president who once feuded with President Donald Trump over manufacturing jobs, now joined by more workers who feel let down by the man they supported.
I now feel betrayed, I feel angry, and I feel forgotten.
Tonight, former Carrier employees shared their stories during a national live stream, hoping the president will hear their frustration. They were counted once optimistically standing in downpours to vote for him.
He was the only candidate to talk about these forgotten men and women, to talk about unfair trade deals, to talk about offshoring. But the problem is he didn't deliver.
We all didn't expect 100% to be saved. That was a given. But we expected a lot more to be saved than what was told that he promised.
At rallies and on Twitter, Trump once claimed there was a 100% chance he could save more than 1,000 Carrier jobs. But union leaders say fewer than 800 remain, with 215 people clocking out tomorrow for the last time. Dwayne Oroscovic is one of the hundreds with only one shift left until the unemployment line.
Yeah, I'm pissed. Pissed, and everyone's sad because we're all departing.
He fears taking another manufacturing job only to go through this same process again in a year or two. Unless the president makes good on his promise to punish and tax companies that move American jobs, he believes that's exactly what will happen.
Sign that executive order for offshoring. All it is it's an easy question. Are you going to sign it or are you not going to sign it? Say yes or no. Yes, you're a hero. No, you're the enemy. It's just that easy.
What I really like about that is that this is a person who might have been deceived. And let's, again, just as we can be totally clear about the Trump base, and I absolutely agree that anybody who voted for Trump was voting to accept things that are totally unacceptable. But at the same time, let's be fair here, too, that these people, their grievances, their anger, what they were concerned about, and what Trump lied to them about, they're absolutely right about. And this guy might have been, he got took in by the scam, but I like that frame at the end. Do it, you're a hero. If not, you're the enemy. We need a lot more of that kind of basic class understanding in American politics.
Yeah, I think people, the reaction where, how could you not do it, is just so worthless and so you stroking your own back, basically.
It's not, moralism is the enemy of the left. And again, it's this actually, it's very hard to pull off, but it's this obvious balance. If somebody says something, well, we're only going to organize, we're not doing, this is American jobs, and people who come from El Salvador aren't American. You smack that down. You totally destroy that because it's wrong and because any broad-based politics is everybody, period. And, but then by that same token, it's like, you're going to sit there? I mean, that trend of oh, well, look at these people. They're getting hit with a hurricane. Too bad they voted for Trump, or ha, 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 you're going to lose your health care. I mean, I would actually say it's disgusting in and of itself. There's very few people. Okay, I'm rooting for Steve Mnuchin to lose his housing and health care. But even in that scenario, when the revolution comes, they'll be in gulags, but they'll still have health care. So, I don't know. I think it's disgusting to wish that. And then even beyond that, setting aside, we can have that debate. It doesn't really matter. You're going to tell this potential future Indiana voter, what's your response? Yeah, man, sorry you got suckered by this fraud scumbag. Here's our plan for higher wages and a good job. Or are we going to be like, hey, we'll have you like your vote. It's not strategic. It's self-satisfied bullshit. Drop it.
it's not an accident that it's been made a luxury to be able to consume hours of news every week, especially if you're a working person.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Oh, and incidentally, Indiana officials who have approved the incentive that include, I'm quoting now, that improved the incentive that included directing $7 million in state tax breaks and grants over 10 years to Carrier towards keeping the Indianapolis factory open. That deal includes Carrier investing $16 million for automation at the plant. The company's CEO has said that ultimately that will mean fewer jobs. And that was even part of the original deal that people allowed to be reported as some type of victory for Trump. I mean, it's really pathetic. And I certainly stand in full solidarity with all those people, even if they voted the wrong way and were taken in by the lies and the scam. So, to be fair to the Trump administration, as loathsome as they are, as incompetent as they are, as Republican as they are, you got to give credit where credit is due. I believe in intellectual honesty, and Jared Kushner has obviously at least achieved one of his major goals, which is Middle East peace. A lot of us didn't think he could do it, but clocking in the first year of the administration, of course, now we have a stable two-state solution. There's full civil rights for Palestinians. They have sovereign authority over the West Bank and Gaza. And even, of course, democratization of minority rights within 67 border Israel has actually been restored, and both nations are living side by side in peace. So credit where credit is due.
It's working, and it's very exciting.
Exactly, it's working. It's very exciting. Oh wait, no, actually, more like the Trump administration has just become overt in the full support of apartheid Israel. And the eventual goal, as reported in the Michael Wolff book, of Steve Bannon saying eventually Jordan will take the West Bank, Egypt will take Gaza. Those are insane. If anything, I mean, Egypt wants very little to do with Gaza and actually helps implement the blockade on it. And Jordan already has deep social tensions with Palestinian refugees already within Jordan. And there's really no reason why they would want to absorb an entirely different, new additional country with actually a lot of political and economic activity. What it, of course, means in practice is just the sort of formalization and overtization of Israeli apartheid. There was a recent proposal by a Likud MP that would essentially turn the West Bank into a semi-autonomous zone, and of course, and again, basically just formalize full Israeli governmental control over populations of people that are not going to have democratic rights and are going to be governed in small Bantustans. And I'm sorry for people who get triggered by this word, but there is literally a word for that. And that word is apartheid. That's just reality, folks. So, and so maybe Jared can pivot from the Middle East because there's no reason to think that these people support anything other than apartheid. And now Jared Kushner is turning his attention to prison reform. This is according to Axios. Today, President Trump will hold a listening session on prison reform after 6 months of quiet exploration of the issue with senior advisor Jared Kushner. And this is a direct quote, who turns 37 today. I'm a big boy now. The White House sees this as a conservative issue. Save money, cut crime, and then get bipartisan support, spending for workforce development, heading into midterms elections next year. Under the auspices of Kushner's Office of American Innovation, administration officials have met with faith-based leaders, former inmates who have been rehabilitated, conservative leaders, and experts on the issue. Attorney General Jeff Sessions will join Thursday's session. How this in any way can be reconciled with the ramp up of basically going back to, even if your state has legalized it, we're going to criminally enforce insane marijuana laws. Jeff Sessions' thirst for reinstituting higher sentences, unshackling police departments to over-police and abuse people across the country. How this will fit, of course, makes absolutely no sense and really does underscore, you should build and work in political coalitions with anybody to achieve specific objectives. I really genuinely believe that principle. But the distinction in a Michelle Alexander critique or an Angela Davis critique of a systemic prison apparatus that is built on structures of class, race domination and part of a larger capitalist project of discarded bodies and actually also very cheaply exploited labor, because there is actually a lot of labor for private industry in American prisons, not to mention the private prison industry, which is, of course, getting a lot of what they want under the Trump administration. If you can't see the difference between that and a sort of like modified libertarianish, let's have less people in jail so we can push them into more poverty jobs, be very aware of it as you see it from the Trump administration, which is not to say that you can't look. If they actually put out some new guidelines reducing nonviolent sentences or whatever, great. I really doubt that will happen. But prison reform is an issue that you got to be very careful about the larger agenda of who you're buying into when you hear somebody talk about it.
Yeah, it's almost like the right realizes that being the world's #1 police state is unsustainable and they want to co-opt the energy.
Right, exactly. Or they might just say, hey, we do essentially want to become exactly like China and be a sort of like market-directed authoritarian state with very sophisticated public opinion polling. I mean, that's the kind of natural logic of where all these Republican and many Democratic and neoliberal policies and the reality of Amazon and Jeff Bezos are leading us. The other side thought is that that Jared Kushner is thinking ahead about his own potential prison experience. I want people to like me when I'm in jail. What you do, Jared, don't worry. You're going to bite the bullet. You're going to go to jail. But all the prisoners are going to like you because we're going to pretend that we don't want them to be in jail forever. All right? Okay, Jared, now buck up. It's your bar mitzvah. It's a big day.
Like father, like son.
Like father, like son. Come on, Jared. I even got Jeff Sessions to come to the meeting and pretend that he doesn't want to destroy pretty much all black people's lives. You're calling from an 847 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Mike Cernovich.
Yes, Mike Cernovich.
Yeah. You've been talking a lot about pizza recently. I've heard in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then they also had an episode about sex trafficking, I see, this week.
So you're seeing a pattern here.
Yes, I know. Yeah. You've been learning from Hillary Clinton, I see.
We call her in the biz, just between me and you, because this is the fun half, and I shouldn't tell you this, but we call her Madame Clinton Chow, and because she actually has she runs an opium den / sex slave ring out of Thailand, and Hillary Clinton usually prefers to wear sequin gowns and smoke opium, like the character on that Netflix show. That's her real identity.
Oh, okay.
Yep. You heard it here first.
Well, that will help me a lot with my research.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I'm giving you an insider tip here, buddy.
Thank you.
I don't know why I did that. What happened to your voice?
What? Hello?
What happened to your voice, Mike?
I'm not good on impressions. So I'm
that
not
I
trying
believe.
to do it.
Yeah, no. Did you have anything else in mind, man?
No, not really. Just making a joke about that. That's pretty much it.
Thank you, dude. That was funny.
MikeSermich.com.
Thermit.com. Thanks for the call, man. Bye-bye.
Who's laughing now, Sam?
Dude, how come you never use the Rogan drop on my show? I'm jealous. Fucking love that. There's not enough drops.
That's a fucking good point.
It's so good. It's a fucking good point. In spite of all, it's like I still like him.
Like,
I just still. I think that's the thing about Rogan. Like, So many garbage guests. So many fucking just
Rogan is
dumb.
what Ruben thinks he is doing.
See, that's the thing. Exactly. Because then on the other hand, like Rogan will still do an awesome rap on DMT. He's funny. He's also so fun. It is truly stunning how persuadable he is. Because like Ruben's the opposite. Like Ruben could sit with the Dalai Lama and be completely not moved to compassion and just a dullard. Ruben could sit with like Cornel West or David Harvey and be like, yeah, but freedom, like, because he's just a fucking moron. Like Rogan also with that, other than on certain things that he gets really tripped up on, unfortunately, like the Harris stuff and certain weird like gender stuff, he's totally like, if he had Cornel West on, you know what he would say to Cornel West? We could just play the
That's
drop.
A fucking good point.
Yeah, exactly.
Mike, if you had one afternoon with Mr. Joe Rogan, what would you guys do?
I would want to get, I actually used to do kettlebells, and I want to get a kettlebell lesson from him. Then I would smoke a spliff. Then probably do my what if Ben Carson was on Howard Stern bit with him. And then after he was really chilling, I might gently bring up some of the stuff that I don't like. The transgender stuff, the Harris stuff. But you know what I did? I do notice, like, because I've been on shows that are kind of in that universe, and I have to say, like, for people like that who might have beliefs that I really fundamentally disagree with, but are not fundamentally committed, at least I don't think, to a toxic project like a Dave Rubin. If you say a lot goes into the framing, and then I think the ultimate test with Rogan would be when you got to the socialist part, and then it would be the real test, because at the end of the day, it's like, dude, as kind of like cool bro as you are, is this all just because you want like a fucking tax cut, dude? Like, have you not done enough ayahuasca to realize that like babies having health care is more important than you buying another Escalade, bro?
That's a fucking good point.
And that would be my hope, is that by the end of the afternoon, he'd say that to me. And then we would take an Instagram picture together and, fucking stay in touch. That's the goal. You're calling from 918 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Brandon from Oklahoma.
Hey, Brendan, what's going on? Big Oklahoma show today.
Yeah. I was going to want to talk a little bit about Bitcoin. There's a lot of misconceptions going on in the chat and what you guys are talking about, and I was going to see if I can maybe set the record straight.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I know it's a bubble, but if anyone's a gamer, they can take their gamer rig and make about $10 a day from mining.
Okay.
Mining makes about $10 a day. All mining is verifying Bitcoin transactions.
Okay.
I'm not a libertarian.
I'm not trying to interrupt. I just want to get to, just for sake of time, I don't think anybody is saying that this isn't something you couldn't potentially make money on, but we've had some bigger critiques. So, okay, so you kind of already said that you could see it's a bubble. So, okay, I think that's one of the main ones. And I guess if this is a misconception of mine, you can correct me, but this is something I'd like to, because I want to have this be a little focused. I don't see.
It's more of Sam's misconceptions, but not you.
Okay. All right. So just okay.
Yeah.
Then go forward, and I won't interrupt. But please don't make it granular. Please make it like, what are the big misconceptions that are going on, that as you see them?
Sure. I see the libertarian points saying, it's not equated to the dollar. Everyone says, how much Bitcoin is to the dollar. That's a big misconception. Is we're not trying to do that. It is, what can I use for Bitcoin to pay someone else to Bitcoin. It's not fiat currency. It's not tied to any government. Back in 2008, whenever it was made, that was the big point, is that it's not centralized to any government. So
why?
First of all, it's decentralized.
So why would you? So like here's my I will totally stipulate. I have no doubt that you know way more about Bitcoin than me. But here's my point to that. Why? Sure. Okay, so historically that when it comes to monetary systems that don't have, things like insurance protections, regulation, oversight, these things are rampant and rife with fraud, with bubbles, with everything else, right?
Absolutely.
If you're trying to build... See, I don't know if it will work, but I know of all sorts of schemes that are not even necessarily currencies, but people create things like time banks, as an example, where people trade. They trade goods and things with each other that honestly should be decommodified. Like a lot of those areas that, we had that great guest on Marxist feminism a couple weeks ago, and the argument was that there's all of these things that take place in the social sphere that aren't compensated, and the neoliberal response is like, maybe, okay, how can we start compensating that? But the Marxist response is that there's actually a whole bunch of things that are commodified that should be decommodified. So is there a way to start compensating people through social arrangements for things that are intangibles? So people share expertise with each other. People, share time. People show up in all these different social and commons ways that aren't money-driven, and creating systems for recognizing that. I totally understand the appeal of those types of things outside the money system. What I don't understand with Bitcoin, and I'm not being facetious, I completely understand if there are things that you want to buy and purchase or support with anonymity. Now, people's minds go to really dark places, and they should, because
dark web.
The dark web, and people do. There are trafficking issues, weapons purchases,
That's
really
the first thing people go towards.
But there's also totally other reasons that I would completely stipulate that are benign and just like, look, if you're involved in organizing an underground, activist movement, and that you're being monitored by security services. I mean, there are reasons for wanting that anonymity on the web that are absolutely not negative. And I understand, and there are ones that are, and I understand that Bitcoin solves for that. What else does Bitcoin solve for that doesn't run into all the pitfalls that we keep outlining?
Well, it has like a built-in mechanism which makes it inflation-proof.
How?
Like there's two parts of it. There is the Bitcoin itself, which a Bitcoin is basically data of every single Bitcoin transaction done in the past. It's a ledger.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone tried to hack Bitcoin and say I have 60 and not 1, every other person that's on the network is saying, no, you don't have 60, you have 1. So it is a ledger that keeps everyone in check.
So there hasn't been fraud in Bitcoin, and there isn't major price fluctuation on it. Because
the hacking is in the exchanges. The exchanges are hackable.
Mm-hmm.
Those are websites that buy and sell Bitcoin. But Bitcoin itself, right now, is not hackable. Once quantum computers comes out, which they can do the equation within seconds,
mm-hmm.
that is hackable. But as of right now, Bitcoin is not hackable.
Okay, but bear with me. I'm sorry I'm interrupting, but I just need to understand this. So then, practically speaking, then, okay, I understand, and as soon as quantum computing happens, I actually do know a bit about that. That will become a whole other level of challenge. But even if something in its platonic form isn't hackable or distorted, but the only way that real people actually interact with it and buy it and trade it is in a hackable marketplace that doesn't have government oversight, okay, so that's still a problem.
Correct. Like, I can have a Bitcoin wallet, and all it is a series of numbers and letters that says, I have this amount.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't have a name tied to it. Once you go onto an exchange and you have to put your ID on it, then your name is tied to it. But if you don't do that and you have what's called a cold storage wallet, which means you keep it offline, no one knows how many Bitcoins you have. So
But what
it comes down to is, well, what I'm basically saying is that yes, it is a bubble, and I see that.
Right.
But for right now, if there's any gamers out there that have just a video card and a badass video card, a badass processor, they can make $5 to $10 a day whenever they're not playing games.
Can I ask you this?
I understand. Okay, I got that.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah,
on
Matt,
that,
go
though.
ahead.
He can't hear me.
Yeah.
Now he can.
No, Matt's going to ask you. Matt's going to ask you a question.
Yeah, I got a question. So does that not seem as a ludicrous way to allocate capital for a currency system?
A ludicrous way? No.
Running a gaming
not
rig?
to me. No.
Why not? You don't see all of the types of things that we sort of critique are inbuilt to what you're talking about, right? Like even just and I'm making a distinction here. There's a lot of things in our world that are smart things for people to do personally in the world we're in, and I don't object to them. That I don't go at people from a moral individual decision-making position. Now, I don't want to overstate that, and I think it is good if you can to avoid certain brands and try to put your dollars to the extent it's possible. Like it's infinitely better to go to justcoffee.coop than to go to some coffee chain, like or support your local business.
Right.
So look, I have no problem if you're saying sure, you have a gaming rig, make $10 a day, cool. Why is that a good way to allocate capital, and how is that in any way liberatory? That's just saying that people who already have resources, who are already rigged into a system, they can profit a little bit more. Yeah, like it's good to, Sam, rents me studio space, yeah, that's a smart move. I don't, so what?
What I'm saying is it's not going to overtake the dollar. It's not going to take euro.
Right.
What it is a different kind of way. There is rumors that an altcoin called Litecoin might go on Amazon. The market's very, very volatile. If anyone puts any U.S. dollars, puts a second mortgage on their house or anything like that, that is stupid. I
know. I hear you. I'm still not. I guess, and it could be that we are just not.
Haven't seen around the curve yet.
It's totally possible. But I simply I feel like, especially with you, because you're not making any grandiose claims about it. It's like, yeah, I agree with you. It's a bubble. You probably, if you have a certain type of computing capacity, can make some money off of it. And if you want to purchase things, and if you want to purchase things anonymously, whether it's for good or for ill, you can use it. Okay, sounds about right. I don't see any revolutionary potential in that.
Just like in your bubble, you can ride it and make a profit.
Cool.
That is capitalism.
But that's right. But that's not what. So the critiques we have, though, we're not giving people an investing advice show. The critiques we have of Bitcoin, and usually when it comes up is in the context of people saying that this has some great liberatory potential. Now, I understand why people who are in a libertarian fantasy life think that, but they're in a libertarian fantasy life.
And that's not me.
No, I know that's not you. I think your position, it sounds about right to me, but I don't, but okay, but this doesn't have any implications for the type of thing. Okay, cool. Then let's continue those conversations. I hope you got some of it across. I don't think there's any disagreements.
We actually do have a guest on the list too that we might follow up on this on.
Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Young Gem, I need to hear the Alpha Males Are Back track again. I can't find it anywhere. I feel like a better person having heard it. Found it.
Oh,
nice.
yeah.
I found it.
Find Danarchy on Twitter.
Danarchy on Twitter. Joseph in Jersey. I fully expect Trump to start a war with North Korea, and Iran, and/or Pakistan. He seems determined to antagonize nuclear powers. When backed into a corner, Trump will, Trump voice, pull a bush and start a war. A big, beautiful, tremendous war. That's horrifying. I mean, and I think, yes, totally possible. Angel, Eminem mentions Sonny Bono in more than one song. Galexicon, Eminem's shit with Ruckus is classic. Albino Ninja, what do you think about Immortal Technique? I like his politics. Oh, here's what I like about Immortal Technique. I heard that he bullied the guy who made Hamilton in high school, and I think that's hilarious.
Chris Hayes also went to that high school.
I wonder if Immortal Technique ever got a crack at Hayes. I like his politics and I like some of his songs, but you got to realize, I really enjoy, I don't have any political litmus test for a culture that I consume. I'm aware of it, and I think critiques are totally valid, but I'm not someone who. So I don't know. I don't think. I think he's good. There's a lot of rappers that lyrically and stylistically I'd put ahead of him. But I think his politics are cool, and he is actually good. There are other people, especially in hip hop, who, they're actually really not good, and they get some mileage, because they say nice things politically. I think Immortal Technique is actually talented. He's just, but he's not on the level of, he's not an A$AP Rocky. He's not a Nas. He's not a Kendrick. He's not even a Drake, and I'm not a big Drake fan. He's not a Lil Wayne, and I'm including here when I say Lil Wayne, these are people with no socially redeeming value, but they're good rappers and they have great beats, or like a Dipset album. I listened to a Dipset album 100 times over Immortal Technique, and Dipset has it's total toxic masculinity. But I like toxic masculine rap. It's the best. And then The Coup. We played them on break earlier. The Coup. I like them a lot, and they're Marxists. Carl Hungus, Mike Jones. What's the Spotify playlist that has the Alpha Male song?
There's not one yet, but we're gonna try to get it on there.
Let's go to the phones. You're calling from a 330 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
This is Richard calling from Ohio.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm good.
Good. Actually, I'm calling to ask a short favor. Since Sam isn't on the air today, I don't feel any particular need to harass you guys at great length.
Oh, fair enough.
But I'll cut you a slack because you're so bloody young. But what I'm calling about is Brexit.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of people who I generally respect are, and they're mostly Brits, are kvetching periodically and at great length about Brexit and what it's going to do, particularly not to England, but to some of the outlying areas' economies, the Ireland, both north and south, and Scotland. And on the other hand, I see Jeremy Corbyn just the other day basically said something along the lines of, "No, we're not going to change course on Brexit. We're still going to. We don't want to remain. We want to get out."
Right.
Now, I have to. It seems to me that one can make a decent argument that, in fact, if it's going to hurt more people than help, it's something that should be revisited, and particularly since, as I've read at least, more people than not who voted, more people are against Brexit than are for Brexit these days.
So I don't know
why is it necessary.
Why is Corbyn holding that position? Is that what you're asking?
Why is Corbyn standing up?
So
I guess what I'd ask you is, can I Could you guys maybe do another episode on Brexit at some point in the near future? That's kind of what I'm asking ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we actually have a funny clip about this that we're going to play in a minute, but I think that the thing with, I don't know the latest polling on Brexit, and Brexit, there's just like probably 2 or 3 points to cover on this. There was a contingent of people that Jeremy Corbyn is a part of, even though he officially changed his position. But there's always been a left critique of the European Union, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, look at what the euro, which they've designed like the gold standard. Look at the absolutely horrific consequences it's had for Greece, as an example. I mean, it's really been just absolute economic terrorism and fundamentally anti-democratic. The EU, in other areas, particularly relative to a strong economy like the UK, which actually lags behind the rest of Europe in certain like environmental and worker standards, in some ways, obviously, it helped up the UK's standards. But I think that Jeremy Corbyn, and this is why in almost all ways he's amazing, and I have an additional point I want to add about this. He's obviously a guy who's not for the seasons. And I think he believes that, look, it won. That's the democratic will of the people. And I don't think he's enamored of the EU project. So I think that he sees a way, and this is actually kind of ironic because he's very, he's not known for, being particularly calculating. He's known for being, very sincere and very clear. I think that he sees a way that labor can kind of both hang on to and keep, getting a certain part of a small but not insignificant working class base that's also going to be drawn to his serious, no bullshit, real anti-austerity politics, and is still pro-Brexit, along with, hanging on to people that are anti-Brexit but recognize that the Tories are completely beholden to the most like xenophobic reactionary people. The other thing, though, that the other 2 real quick things to mention, people talk about the economic consequences of Brexit, and I think they're real and they're a problem. But, the Financial Times has pieces about how, British oligarchs are making plans for Corbyn being elected to, get their money out of the country and cause real economic harm. So some people with one side of their mouth are talking about the economic danger of Brexit. The other side of their mouth, they might actually have to, pay an appropriate tax bill and recreate somewhat of a decent society in the UK. And they're ready to, fold tent and get out of there. And obviously, Tony Blair being a prime mouthpiece for another referendum on Brexit doesn't help, even though I think, some of those arguments are valid. And then the third really quick point I would make is that, and this is minutia that we could get into in an interview, but, what Brexit exactly means and who is negotiating it means very different things to different people. So, the Tories are trying to negotiate a Singapore Brexit where they're still pretty economically entwined, but they don't have to have any of the labor openness, which actually is very dangerous in Ireland specifically, because part of the reason that Good Friday worked is because of an open border between northern and southern Ireland. And also they want to, lower wages and attack workers and do everything that any good, that any right-wing party wants to do. If Corbyn gets in there, that negotiation will be totally different. And, so it could be like, hey, we're going to stay in the customs union. We're going to keep a part of all of these EU structures. We might even try to have higher standards than the EU, but we don't want to be part of, like, as an example, an EU defense compact, which might be revitalized under, Macron. So there's a lot of different ways it could play out, basically. But I mean, I don't think I wouldn't have voted for Brexit if I was in the UK. But that's my basic read on it, Richard.
Okay. Well, like I said, I would be interested in hearing a longer term, I agree. Another interview or an analysis of it.
Yep. I'll definitely look into it. Probably have on Owen Jones again on it. Thanks, Richard. Okay. So, speaking of Brexit, most of the callers to this show, I'm sometimes accused of being impatient with callers, but I actually really like most people who call into the show. What? No, this guy's super patient. I was talking about me. I was setting it up to say that, this guy's a saint. I'm not as patient as this guy. But this clip that was pointed out to us, this was tweeted as if Doug and Greg had a love child and the person grew up in the UK, it would be this caller. And I clicked on it. This is a caller calling into the James O'Brien program. And he's asking the caller if the caller can name one good thing that Theresa May has accomplished as prime minister. Of course, he's got nothing, but watch this some of these tropes might be familiar to Majority Report listeners.
For what?
A very difficult job. Now, you position yourself as a caring...
Let's not talk about me, because you're the first Brexiters to get through. So what's she done that makes you cheer?
She's doing what the people voted for.
Well, what specifically, Gavin? Well, you'd point at something and say...
She said, the people voted for Brexit, we're going to carry that out.
That was 18 months ago. So what's she done since that gives you hope?
There's a lot going on. The trouble is these days,
It's not a trick question, mate. Just give me one thing that makes you go, yes, that proves that she's the right person for the job. What would you point to first? Just one thing. We don't have to...
Everything is under the microscope these days, and...
Well, then that means it's easier to see, Gavin, if it's under the microscope. So just describe it to me. The thing that you're looking at under the microscope and thinking, that's good.
To see. Some things you shouldn't see until afterwards.
So they're not under a microscope. They're invisible.
No. If I can just finish, everything is micro, it's under a microscope these days. Now, she is obviously, there's things going on in the background, that's the point I was getting to, that we don't know about that will become evident.
Right.
There's obviously loads of things.
So the things you're really pleased with are the things that you don't know about.
No, you asked me whether she's doing a good job, and I'm saying to you, she's doing a...
And then I said, and then point to the evidence. So the thing that you would say, there you go, James, that proves she's doing a good job. What would you point to first?
Well, the fact that she's triggered Article 50, she's got things moving. There's obviously things going on in the background. Things crop up, regularly.
So we don't know then. I mean, let's not fall out, but you're telling me she must be doing lots of good things in the background that we don't know about, and that's why you think she's doing a good job. You're entitled to that view, mate. I'm not going to mock it.
Say to Ian Dow, and I don't think it was a fair question, do you still believe in remaining? Because what does it matter what she believes in? She's carrying out the will of the people.
Well, again, that phrase is, you'll forgive me, very much at the top of the list of fatuous and meaningless slogans. She's carrying out the will of
52-48, James.
Some of the people, and it might be different today, but you see the problem.
She's carrying out what the referendum result.
Yeah, but again, that was 18 months ago. So the problem is, of course, that I admire you for ringing in and talking to me, but obviously when I keep pointing out to you that you've got not a single shred of evidence to support your notion that she's doing a good job, and yet you still think that Brexit is a good idea, you actually, without intending to, you explain why I think she's doing a good job, because she has to actually keep people like you happy. I just wanted to keep saying things like Brexit means Brexit. That's what I mean, exactly. So she has got a significant swathe of the electorate who've got nothing more than just parroting will of the people and Brexit means Brexit. And people like me sit here and think they must want some evidence. Gavin must want some evidence. He must be able to point at something substantive, something meaningful, something evidential. And you can't, James. And you don't want to either.
No, James, listen.
We're not talking about me, Gavin.
No, but you're not letting me get the point across. You're twisting things.
Well, tell me again then. The question's simple.
About Brexit.
Go on then.
And you do this every
Not me,
day.
mate. We're talking about you. What is the thing that you're really pleased with?
How many times have I got to tell you? She's carrying out...
The will of the people.
She carried out what the vote asked for.
So how?
Oh, this is great. Oh, I feel so much empathy for that guy. I have absolutely had that call, and I have not had anywhere near the level of patience. Oh, he was starting to crack.
You know what would be really fun is to see that happen, the same thing happen in like France. Yes. But you just can't really understand, you don't really know what they're saying, but you can just read the body language.
Right. That point where you just start hunching the chair like, oh, I get it. The people's will. But what specifically? Just do that like everywhere in the world to get it with like a Mandarin translation, Swahili, just like, okay, yes.
That's funny. His point about what she's doing well is making people like that happy, which is about all Trump's doing well too.
Exactly. That LBC host gets it. You make stupid people happy. But that point in the call when someone that reminded me that was actually like in some ways a much more civil version of my whole debate with that Akkad guy. Oh yeah. It's like, can you define that? So you are a leftist. Yep. Could you give me a definition, please? Have you ever heard of Ezra Klein?
Just another comment on Bitcoin. You know, you talk about you run your gaming rig all day. People are making the comment like, well, that costs electricity.
Right.
But Bitcoin really is the perfect thing if your parents are, say, paying for your electricity.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I would have to think about that when I look at like a check at the beginning, like at the end of the month. Like, oh, I spent this much on electricity. Does that balance? But if you're just like, hey, Ma! That's not working. Trying to buy Bitcoin. Looking fucking bored.
Also, I'm not an economist, but it doesn't strike me as immediately a good thing that inflation is impossible.
Yes.
Like, inflation serves some good purposes.
Inflation serves some good purposes. I also like that. It is funny. Like, they're really good. What did Perrine say? Like the best thing, like the slickest thing that Bitcoin has been able to do is just like get like young basketball players to like get rid of their real money for fake money. That's like what they've done. Not to mention the fucking environmental consequences of Bitcoin. I mean, I forget, I don't have it in front of me, but like the processing power of that and the environmental impact.
Well, the problem is it's not efficient. Like, that's why you need to run gaming rigs across the planet to solve for their equations and like check them, because they actually take a long time and a lot of computing power. That's another flaw, at least as far as I've been made aware.
I think they said 6 months. It'll be, if it keeps growing at this rate, it'll use as much power as the U.S.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That is absolutely insane. And you know what I think the other problem is it goes back to this whole, like, it's less trendy now, but if you go to like the different waves of like talking about like the idea economy and the weightless economy, and like people had this whole rhetoric of anything that was enabled by tech as something magical and something new. And first that was a problem because obviously most of it was just replicating old patterns of labor exploitation and capital allocation. But on top of that, it's like all of this shit is still like this computer, which you can't see, but like they're made by real things. Like, just because we're all like up in the cloud taking, dick pics or whatever people are doing, like, doesn't, like, iPhone is made by resources that are mined from Congo and implicate wars there. This is all stripped from the environment, assembled in mass factories. Like, the air weightless economy is literally, and the processing power, the massive data farms that fuel all of this is very much weighted and industrial and in the real world. Like, people talk about this as if it's in some kind of fantasy space, and it's simply not.
Yeah, it's easy to remove yourself from those consequences. I have a friend that does rare mineral mining, and he's like, if people had any idea how scarce these resources are, they would think twice about buying a new phone when the screen cracks or something along those lines.
What? I thought it came from the Chinese.
Don't worry.
Elf factory.
The free enterprisers, the job creators, they got that all taken care of.
Yeah, we have it taken care of. I have a proposal where children can be reverse engineered to provide blood and minerals in an ongoing state. Here's a thought board for the Palantir board. What if data farms were children's blood farms? Processing the power of the Internet of Things and creating longevity for the entrepreneurs of the future. Hi, I'm Peter Thiel.
Up next to the stage, we have Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos.
Yeah, exactly.
And her new blood spinning that turns children's blood into rare minerals.
Yeah, but to Elizabeth Elizabeth Holmes' credit, Theranos was a fraud that scammed these people and took them away from their money. She was actually
continues to take their money.
She's brilliant. How does she still take, like, isn't that like completely like publicly established that they falsified research? I thought that wasn't even a question.
Well, it also needs to be publicly established that there's a lot of dumb money in venture capital.
Right. So in other words, this scandal-plagued startup with a questionable technology might be getting same money from the same people that are pumping it into the raw water fad. Is that what you're saying? That all of a sudden maybe Silicon Valley people, a chunk of them, in spite of their money and degrees, might actually be fucking morons?
We'd be better off having bureaucrats allocate that cash.
I could not agree more. Like a real like in an East German suit, like a Ralph Nader with less charisma. That's what I want. You're calling from a 347 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello.
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 You're on.
Oh, hi. This is Eric from Queens.
Hey, what's going on, Eric?
So, not much. But I wanted to respond to the dude who called from Oklahoma. I think it was about Bitcoin mining and gamers running their rigs to make $10 a day.
Mm-hmm.
And that really just shows how stupid this whole idea is. I mean, just a quick anecdote. Like, me and my buddy, we built gaming rigs last year. We got into PC gaming.
Right.
I had more money than he did, so I built a better machine. If we were to both be mining Bitcoin, I'm going to make more money than he does.
Right.
So I don't see how this
sounds
liberates
great.
anybody.
So Bitcoin's great. That's what you're saying.
New Trump brand,
Yeah.
Trump
Pretty much.
brand gaming computers. Get them at Computer One.
It's all just like it's what Alfie Salomon says in Peaky Blinders, the Jewish gangster played by Tom Hardy. It's one of the best performances I've ever seen. And he always just goes, the big fuck the small, ain't it? That's like what all the stuff is and everything.
Yeah.
And the point is to step out of it, not to just recreate it in an imaginary
exactly.
coin
someone
rig.
Someone who has a better rig than I do and maybe access to more electricity. It's the reason I don't play online games, because kids who live in their rich parents' house who sit around playing all day, they'll kick my ass. So I'm not going to play against them. They also have the ability to theoretically get more of this monopoly money than I do. So it doesn't solve any problems.
So
And
basically
also,
another way for
don't-
useless
don't- yeah.
sociopaths to make more money while they waste their lives playing Call of Duty. Yeah, I said it. Tweet at me.
Exactly.
You bastards.
No, you're 100% right. And please don't let your machines run 24/7 unless it's optimized to do that. You'll also shorten the life of your machine. So you'll get $10 a month in Bitcoin, but in 6 months you'll probably spend $300 on a new graphics card.
So it'll be like, so basically it's like Will Ferrell in Wedding Crashers being like, "My meatloaf," but now he can say that I'm running a Bitcoin business, bro.
Pretty much.
All right.
And honestly, like, one more thing and I'll
Yeah.
get off.
Yep.
Like, over the holidays, I was at my relative's house and they all live in Long Island. They're on a better socioeconomic status than I am.
Right.
And they were talking about Bitcoins and how, like, someone was able to pay off their student loans with it. And, like,
And that
I
same
can't do
person
that.
could have, yeah, but that same person could have. There is no doubt that the mechanism that allowed that person to get enough Bitcoin to pay off their student loans means that that person could have paid off their student loans with money.
Exactly.
Like what? Like it's it is so. It's like mystifying to me. Like I remember one time I was on a boat, literally a boat with a wealthy Long Island family. And I shouldn't go into more detail than that. And this woman was like, she was amazed. She was like, I was at Whole Foods and the people in front of me, there was like a $600 worth of groceries, so much groceries. And they got rang up and they paid for it in cash. Can you believe you have that much money? You have it in cash? And I'm sitting there, I'm like, look, if you want that much cash, go to one of your multiple fucking bank accounts and take it out. And then you could have this exciting experience that you're so mystified by.
She's saying that's not classy.
No, she actually wasn't saying. I realized it could be sounded like that, but she was literally saying it as like it almost like maybe like someone's living on the edge Or like, who carries cash like that? Maybe she was like, you could get mugged or something. I don't know, but she almost was saying it like she envied it. Like, my friend has a new convertible and they have cash. Anyways, thanks for the call, man.
Well, clearly, Bitcoin ain't changing that dynamic. So there you go.
Bitcoin ain't changing
All right,
that
love the show,
dynamic.
guys.
That should be the name of the book about Bitcoin. Thank you.
We should book that Bitcoin guest we have on too. It looks really interesting.
I know. I would be like, that would be another funny. I think like if I could do like a Cornel West impression, like Cornel West Bitcoin evangelical would be funny. We got to like enlist, like we enlist Alex Jones as woke, but we got to create some like some super brilliant like socialist scholar to be like, that's why you got to get Bitcoin, brother. It's gonna you sitting there, you're making $10 a day with your video games. It's gonna revolutionize everything. That's what Trotsky, Jesus, Tolstoy. That's what they were all talking about.
The only
brother.
downside to that is you'd have to basically dive into the culture of Bitcoin for enough material to make jokes, and that kind of seems unpleasant.
Forget that. You're calling from a 909 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, my name's Noah. I'm from Upland, California.
Hey, what's going on?
No, nothing. I was just calling to ask if you, I don't know if you talked about it already, but did you hear about sorry, I'm walking.
Sorry.
The Ta-Nehisi Coates, Cornel West thing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've covered, I have to say I covered that a lot on my show, but and I think we talked about it briefly on this show. Yeah. A couple weeks ago, talked about it with Adam Proctor, and actually in this September episode, Bhaskar Sunkara of Jacobin and I went over Ta-Nehisi Coates. So yeah. But I mean, I guess basically to shortly answer you, I mean, I'm basically I have a bunch of caveats and stuff. You can look it up, but I mean, I'm basically Team West in the sense that I just think, sorry?
No, I was just going to say, like, I felt the same way, but I had mixed feelings about it because I have relatives that are, like, they read Ta-Nehisi Coates a lot, but, like, I don't know, it came off like, my grandpa was like, oh, he's just trying to sell books, you know what I mean? Because his book is coming out or something.
He's reissuing, I think it's something like the 20-something anniversary of Race Matters, and he's reissuing it. I mean, look, here's the thing. You could say, and I actually agree, I think in some ways, like, Cornel West on The Root, the video he did on The Root was much more effective than the Guardian column. I think the Guardian column really did have just an unnecessary amount of like Ta-Nehisi Coates I have criticisms of, but he's not like a Sam Harris. Like, he's not a person that just deserves like, sort of like unending contempt. Ta-Nehisi Coates does some very valuable things. He's a talented writer. I definitely appreciate him in some ways. But that said, on the flip side, and I'll let you go after this, it's unbelievable to me that when Cornel West is building a critique around neoliberalism, and a much larger conversation, honestly, going back to Obama, that the responses to Cornel West are always neoliberal. Like, it's always that, well, he's just trying to sell books or he's a hater. There's never, I mean, first, it's funny because there's rarely a substantive response. And secondly, it's funny because that line of counterattack is, don't hate the play, hate the game. Like, that's... that's exactly what it is. I appreciate the call, man. Thanks. You're calling from a 928 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
What's going on, man? My name is NJPW. I'm actually calling from East Oakland, California, man. I know I don't fit your normal calling demographics, but we're going to switch it up and get real ignorant for a sec, man.
Oh, please. You should also call my show. No, please. Yeah, man, go ahead,
check
man.
It out, man.
Tell me.
First of all, man, I was in the YouTube chat, collecting welfare checks playing NBA 2K right now, man. And I just want to say, man, for all them fans talking about Aesop Rock and Soul, don't nobody want to hear that garbage, man. You know what I'm saying? No, the streets don't listen to that. Don't nobody want to hear that nonsense, man. Straight up, man.
Go off.
As far as rap goes, man.
Right.
That's just garbage.
Yep.
And so I understood your point about Immortal Technique, you know what I'm saying, and not wanting to hear that shit because, man, it's like, man, you want to be entertained when you listen to rap, especially when you're involved in politics like you are. You want to be entertained.
That's exactly right. That's exactly. Yep.
And the second thing I wanted to say was that, first of all, the caves of Yaqub are complaining about their Wi-Fi, man. You might want to be there to telegram about that, man. You know what I'm saying?
You got to call it more. Thank you.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? You know how the 10%ers, man, you know what I'm saying? You know, we gotta look out for them too if we're gonna be, doing social justice and all that. You feel me?
Always.
And no, but one thing I really wanted to ask for real though, man, for real is did you see an article, I forgot who read it, because I mean I'm black, you know what I'm saying, I can only remember so much. It was called the lowest white man on the New York Times.
The lowest white man.
It was an article about the Lyndon Johnson quote and about the low standard that Trump had set and how a lot of his supporters need to believe that, no, he's still better than Obama, but he's still better than Obama.
Well, I haven't read it, but I
totally,
I think that's absolutely describes almost all. Oh, okay, that's Charles Blow. Yeah, I mean, I haven't read it, but I totally buy that dynamic completely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and it just,
and not just for his supporters, for him himself. I mean, it's not just for him support. I mean, he obviously has, he's obviously a tremendous racist himself. And I think it really does personally grate him because it's like he must recognize on some level, like Barack Obama is just a purely superior human specimen to Donald Trump in every way, shape, and form, right? And I think that I think there is some dissonance because I think that on some level, even the dumbest of them, which of course includes Trump, actually recognizes that. And I think that is a major part of their mythology and self-belief. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate the call. You are calling from a 412 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, what's up? It's Kabe. I'm calling from Pittsburgh.
Hey, what's going on, Kabe?
How much, man? Just want to say, first of all, huge fan of Majority Report. Been a listener for 2 years,
Thank
every
you.
day, basically.
Awesome, thanks.
And also a fan of Michael Brooks' show.
Thank you.
You guys are awesome, especially the new intro and everything. Love it. It's fresh.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm calling in response to the talk about Bitcoin. That's why I wanted to kind of establish that I'm a huge fan first.
Okay, sure.
Because I think there's a lot of statements being made that aren't being challenged, and I think it might discourage people from getting into it and making some cash off of it. So in response to your last caller, yes, you can own a more expensive mining rig than your friend and make more money than your friend, but neither of you can own a money printing machine at the Federal Reserve, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that brings me to my question to you is, what makes the U.S. dollar more real than a Bitcoin?
The government, the federal government, which, we with our politics totally, yes, the faith and
Federal
credit
Reserve.
in the United States government. Yes.
Right. And then you have someone like Donald Trump and Steve Mnuchin who's in charge of that, as opposed to a community of people who are all contributing to the control of the currency.
Yeah, but the point is
community made up of people with gaming rigs.
Yeah, I don't see how this.
So, and then to that point about the.
But we'll hold on just one second, just really quickly though, because this is where the historical sweep is important. So, yes, there is no doubt that, of course, and we already know that modern, monetary policy from the Reagan era forward has been, has driven inequality, has favored the corporate sector. Of course, there are people in leadership positions who can mismanage and abuse and all the rest. But the context that we got to was things like the banking collapse that led to, major reforms during the New Deal, as an example. We've been through experiments, both on one end, which I know you're not advocating, where we have like a gold standard, which is what people like the Koch brothers fundamentally want, and actually what the EU is, where you lock into place literally the amount of flexibility you have with your currency, and that leads to incredibly socially regressive and wealth-favoring policies. And we also have the experience of a bunch of small banks and various institutions playing and creating their own currencies and playing on the market, and that led to a lot of fraud and money loss. Like, even with Trump and Mnuchin in charge, I want my savings put in a position where they are insured by the I'm forgetting the name of it, the FDIC, right? Like, that is fundamental. And there's also nothing with Bitcoin. This strikes me because I hear what you're saying, but that's why I was trying to get to earlier about all these other alternative currency models, because I think that there's people like you involved in Bitcoin who have good politics and good instincts, but most people involved in Bitcoin are gold bugs, and they are libertarian fantasists, and it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I actually want to change that, man, because that's something that bothers me about it, and I want to bring us into because it's unstoppable at this point, man. Like, it's going to keep going, and I want
keep
us
going
to
for
interject
what though?
Into this.
For what?
Well, okay,
and how?
so you guys are using Steam. You guys are using Steemit.
Mm-hmm.
That's a cryptocurrency-based social media, and now Zuckerberg is going to introduce cryptocurrency into Facebook.
I have no doubt.
So I instead of pushing it away, I want the left to embrace it and take over the discourse, because what cryptocurrency is doing on a huge scale is it's making people question what money is even. And I think that we can harness that from a Marxist perspective. And I'm not the person to do it myself. I'd like to introduce ideas, but I think that we can really harness it and sort of interject ourselves into the space and push the libertarians out. That's what I would like to do.
Dude, if you have people writing this argument in a Marxist perspective, I'll even give you an anarchist perspective, or even just like a legit center-left, liberal, progressive, whatever perspective, making actual arguments about how this happens. Because what I still don't understand is I still see cryptocurrency in the same way that I see all this other technology, which is that some of this stuff is totally revolutionary and game-changing for our human existence and how we function and operate. And I don't know cryptocurrency will be on the level of, some of those other innovations, but I think it's not going away, and it's a real thing. But there's nothing. We could revolutionize every aspect of how we live, how we consume, how we work. The rules of capital are still in place. And there's nothing that I have seen that would make Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency anything else other than just an additional reflection of all of the other inequalities and dysfunctions that we already have inbuilt in the system, starting with that in order to even play in that game, you need a tremendous amount of leisure and commuting power. So I just don't see it. But honestly, I'm not opposed to being persuaded otherwise. I just haven't heard it. So if you got recommendations, definitely email.
So in response to the computing power issue, which is a huge issue, the whole environmental thing is not a good look. But there's a lot of currencies, such as BitShares, and Ethereum is doing it now. They're moving to a thing called proof of stake instead of proof of work. Proof of work is the energy consumption one. Proof of stake is a randomized algorithm that's based on who has shares in the coin. So it takes a lot less computing power, and it's much more sustainable.
No, I was talking about, I agree, I understand. I was talking about people literally being, you need to be at such a level of material affluence and comfort in order to even figure out what Bitcoin is, let alone potentially profit off of it. That again,
I don't know. I mean, I learned about it in 2013 when I was making $40,000 a year and barely getting by on rent, and it helps me get some extra money to do extra stuff.
Well, as I told the dude before, awesome. I don't have any. I am totally. Again, that's
why we're doing Steemit.
Yeah, that's why we're doing Steemit. This distinction,
exactly,
I keep trying to.
Dude, exactly.
No, but that's not exactly, dude. That doesn't mean there's nothing revolutionary about that. That's literally just like a small business.
There is though, because
growing
you're
things.
Getting paid for posting interesting content.
Right.
And it's purely on a user to viewer ratio.
How is that
it's
different?
Not based on a corporation paying for ads. You are
That's
getting paid
over
for
90% of this show, and 100% of my show is based on the same model, just without digital currency. There's no difference. It's just a mechanism.
But, I mean, I just don't think it's.
So I agree. I think actually, for all of its many flaws and problems, Patreon is a pretty innovative platform. The idea of even just doing a business like this to begin with, where you have a direct relationship with your audience and they pay you directly, is potentially very significant. Again, it just seems like still a second order thing.
Economy.
Okay, man. I call back in. We do got to run. Okay. Thank you.
No, can I?
I can't. I can call back in. I'm sorry. I cannot get to all calls. You're calling from a 518 area code. This will be the last call. I apologize to everybody else who's waiting. Calling from a 518 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael. This is James from Niskayuna.
Hey, what's up?
So the caller from Oklahoma has opened the Hellgate, and now you will only get Bitcoin-related calls.
I'm noticing this. There was a Sam Harris period. There's the libertarian period. Then there was also the math period.
Oh, that was weird. Yeah.
And I'm noticing that was really fucking. That was like the agents of big math were. It was amazing that people were just like, I've been teaching horrible, torturous models of irrelevant math theorems for years. We better continue.
If we teach 5 minutes less math in class, and the whole world is going to collapse.
That was amazing. We're like, by golly, if kids knew geometry better, there wouldn't be a Trump. People lost their fucking minds with that one. I remember that. Yeah, it looks like we're going down another terrifying road here. I hear you. Yes.
No. But so on Bitcoin, the first caller was saying that Bitcoin can't be hacked, which brought to mind that's not even actually true. There's this super fun, not really, thing called the 51% attack.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you guys have heard of this. Basically, if someone controls or like an individual or a consortium controls 51% or more of the whichever cryptocurrency is in circulation. Basically, due to the way that Bitcoin uses a ledger system to verify transactions, that group can actually prevent anyone else from having an accepted transaction and can also like double and triple spend Bitcoins that they already have. So they could basically just, completely annihilate it or just use it to essentially as a personal printing press.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, unfortunately, I feel bad for these callers because they're just, I'll read more, but it's just clarifying my thinking that it has plenty of problems in and of itself, and then to the extent to which it's beneficial it's beneficial and interesting, it's still just a second order thing. Like if you
it's
revolutionary,
it's all completely
serious change is never going to happen through any tech mechanism. You have to recreate, to use that language. If you don't reorder the operating systems, then it's all just the same shit replicated with new tech. And I don't know how many more things we need to go through to learn that lesson.
Yeah, Bitcoin isn't politics.
Right. Or it is politics, like everything is politics, and it's, it's capital politics.
Right, exactly. It's not a replacement for politics.
It's not a exactly. Exactly, it's perfect. All right, thanks, man. I apologize, everybody. We can't get to any more calls. Let's do this one piece of sound real quick, and then we'll do a few more IMs, and then we're out of here. I did want to just say this because Eric Greitens, who is Missouri's governor, has admitted an extramarital affair but denies reports that he blackmailed a woman with a nude photo. This is according to a report in Washington Post. Missouri Governor Eric Greitens, responding to media reports, acknowledged Wednesday night that he was unfaithful to his wife a few years ago before being elected. But his lawyer denied sensational allegations aired by a local TV station that Greitens threatened to distribute naked photos he took of the woman with whom he was having a relationship if she ever said anything about it. In a joint statement posted on Wednesday by Greitens and his wife Sheena, said that in part, quote, a few years ago, there was a time when he was unfaithful in our marriage that was a deeply personal mistake. Eric took responsibility and we dealt with this together honestly and privately. He's a relatively new star of the Republican Party. He's one of these guys who you'll see in a second in this absolutely deranged ad. He's hard on the MAGA thing, but he's formerly a Democrat. He has a PhD from Oxford. And this whole machismo image is just ridiculous. And obviously, hopefully, this will, damage him significantly politically. And I say this not because, look, hypocrisy arguments with these people are utterly irrelevant. Not only are they irrelevant because, first of all, every human being possesses hypocrisy to some extent. And Republicans, if you're operating an authoritarian mindset, you're never, ever going to be persuaded. And it also fits into their own mythology of forgiveness and religion and in and out and all the rest. But I just want to say, when you watch this ad, this Crichton's ad when he was running for governor, I think was this last year? Yeah. This ad now, when you see an ad like this, and you will see a lot of ads like them, and we already have, I think that now this should just be taken, like, the translation of an ad like this should be like, I almost definitely have engaged in incredibly unethical and or bizarre personal and financial behavior, and I'm completely insane.
I'm Eric Greitens. For too long, Missouri's been run by career politicians, owned by corrupt consultants, high-paid lobbyists, and special interests. While they get rich, Missourians are hurting. Well, I'm no career politician. I'm a Navy SEAL, and I'll take dead aim at politics as usual. I'm Eric Greitens. If you're ready for a conservative outsider, I'm ready to fire away.
I didn't know Jews could be tough. I let Ivanka marry Jared when I thought all Jews looked like they had rickets. Totally unfair. So, yeah, anytime you see some freak commercial like that by some freak candidate, you should assume that, like, an affair is the least of it. All right.
Greitens was on a call with some donors last I saw, so things might be, I don't know if they're going to push him to resign or what.
This is great. And by the way, that whole thing that he said about, how the state is losing, he's been, of course, doing everything he can to destroy public education, impoverish the university system, and degrade living standards and scientific investment, of course, across the state to give rich people money, obviously. Standard Republican.
Now, Talking Points memo with an exclusive. Missouri governor accused of blackmail allegedly slapped ex-lover.
Oh. Yeah, it was like a 50 Shades of Grey scenario is what I gathered from reading. Not to get salacious, folks.
So maybe he'll get a couple of points up approval rating with the Republican base. So I know Jews had the ball. First of all, this Jew's goddamn Navy SEAL. Now he's out slapping women. Wish I could vote for that son of a bitch again. Abyss. I mean, watch the ad. You know that guy is a horrible person. You know he's garbage. Abyss. Don't forget about San Francisco Bay Area for hip-hop. Too Short was prominent by the mid-'80s out of Oakland. It's true. I apologize. I'm not going to be able to get to all I ams. Grant, footage from today's protest at New York City's Javits Federal Building. ICE detained activist Ravi Ragbir and arrested religious activists. Rural Oklahoma. I'm not sure what the reference to Sonny Bono is and who knew. All I thought is that it was funny that a guy named Steve Berman called into the show only after the call about Eminem. Only Eminem fans will get that irony. Oops, I thought he said Steve Berman, not Bannon. Still ironic, though. Freedom for Palestine. Trump's embrace of the Saudis and actions against Iran are increasingly destabilizing. Do you think Saudis would have played that nonsense with Saad Hariri without Trump's go-ahead? No, I don't. To be fair, it failed miserably by making both Hezbollah and Iran stronger in Lebanon. Also, what's the best way to call from Beirut or South Lebanon? I tried Skype before, but it doesn't seem to work. Skype might... If Skype isn't working, that might be something going on in Lebanon. Yeah. You can definitely call Skype into
Fire
the show.
RTC is the other option.
Or try Fire RTC. Walmart, Sean MD, Walmart's praise for raising minimum wages, also closing down Sam's Club stores without telling their employees. Of course. Joe R., do you want to talk pizza? New Haven is the only style pizza is the best in the world. Brooklyn definitely number 2. Sorry, Uchiwala, get out of here with your Chicago pan pizza nonsense. I have to admit, New Haven does have amazing pizza. New Haven has it has like a small little Italy and has 2 pizzerias that have been open since like the 20s and 30s. And it's really quite good. All right, let me find a suitable final I am. I apologize again, missing a ton, but we went way over. really cool with the final IM of the day. Analogous to the Bitcoin gamers are day traders who spend their day pumping and dumping on the stock market. Until 07 and 08, these guys were basically gambling all day, usually making a good living if they had instincts and some insider knowledge, otherwise becoming suicidally financially devastated in the end. I would be very careful of that if you're playing on Bitcoin. See you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive.